Previously on The Venomous Fringe.
The whole area with the flashlight, there was nothing there. I mean, there was like, it was gone. Whatever it was there 1 second, and it was gone. Either camouflaged or hid or walked off so quietly or something. But I know that growl woke me up, and then the smell that was right there, and we didn't hear a noise after that. So then we grabbed the nieces and we all slept in one tent that night, and we took off early the next morning because we were just not gonna take a chance on whatever it was. So that was my first encounter of something that I believe was a Bigfoot. Nothing there. We started talking again. He looked again, and he screamed. He screamed really loud, and my grandpa came running out, and he says like, what the hell's the matter? You know, he's mad. And my friend said a baboon looked through the window. He said it was a baboon, and my grandpa was very paranoid, man. He had, the alarm systems in the house. He had guard dogs for us to go to the canyon and just to walk around and just to see what's down there, And so we weren't planning on being there after dark, so we didn't take our flashlights. And those of you who don't know, like the canyon life, above the canyon, it could be daylight, and inside the canyon, it gets dark really fast. A lot faster, and when it gets dark, it's like pitch black. So,
and now, part 2. Okay, so Lobo, want to talk about what happened to you recently. You had a pretty interesting experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, probably about a week ago or a week and a half ago, as we're talking about this canyon, there's a really nice trail on the rim of the canyon, where we can ride our bikes, we can walk, and you can enjoy the beautiful scenery without going inside the canyon. And me just living down the street, we often do bike rides and walks down there. And so my daughter and I, she's 8 years old, we go bike riding. And when we're bike riding, I always have my especially if it's just me and my daughter, her go in front of me because it's a downhill grade, and if something happens, I'll go straight to her, versus if she was behind me and it's downhill and something happens, I have to either jump off my bike or ride uphill. So she's in front of me and she's going down, and all of a sudden in this area, which is kind of across the street from the livestock area where they keep all these beef cows for selling, and they it's for meat. So we're riding down there, and she's in front of me, I'd say about probably like 30 feet maybe in front of me, 20 feet, and she just wrecks her bike on the side of the trail, basically jumps off, rolls, and there's splinters, there's those goat heads everywhere, and she's got them all in her side, and she just takes off running, and she starts screaming, "It's right there, it's right there." And in my heart, I'm like, what's going on? And by the time I get there, I hear the rustling on the left side. I hear the bushes moving, and all I see is black fur inside the bushes. And I stop, and she's running away, and she's getting far off, and I back up. I start backing up, and I'm like not taking my eyes off of it, and I'm looking back at her, looking back at it, and I'm yelling to her, "Come back, come back." So she comes closer to me, and she's crying, literally. She says that she's seen the black fur of this creature, and she thought it was a bear. She goes, "It's a bear, it's a bear." And I'm like, what do you mean it was a bear? Are you sure? And she said that she's seen its massive neck, and when it seen her, it turned to her, and she said she didn't look at it in the face. She was like, couldn't look at it in its face, but she said it kind of lunged towards her, and then it turned its neck again and saw me, and that's when it ran back into the bushes. But she thought it was going to grab her, and so that was that incident. And so what I did was I called the Idaho Fish and Game, and submitted my report, and they came down, and we went to the location. And this guy, he's like packing some heat, and he's going in looking in these bushes. He's not going in there, he's just looking and taking pictures, and he's asking me, like, about how big it was and whatnot, and he asked me if there was any reports of big black dogs in the area, and I didn't say anything about a big black dog. I didn't say, I said no. I said not that I know of. Have you been getting reports like that? And he goes, oh, just wondering. He goes, I just wanted to see if it maybe she could have mistaken it for a Labrador or something. He said, and I'm like, no. He goes, did you see? Did you see it? I told him all I seen was black fur deep in those bushes. And so he began to look and check it out, and he's like, well, whatever it was, it almost sounded like it was intelligent because he said there's no tracks, there's no hair, whatever it was in a perfect spot not to leave a trace. There was no dirt, there was no mud, anything right there. And he said he was going to talk to his superiors, and if they needed to take it further to that they would. And for us, if we're going to go down there, not to go at night, and if we go in groups, and if we do go, we make sure that we make a lot of loud noise. And just a little bit on the other side of that can on the same side we were on, there's a yard, and there's this little he's a pup German Shepherd. He's not full grown, but he doesn't bark at us at all. We drive down there all the time. He doesn't bark at all. But as we're pulling up, I think about it, he was barking, looking in that location. And I didn't think about it till afterwards. And then when me and my daughter ran off, like we literally took off fast, he was still barking, looking at that location, which was pretty interesting, pretty creepy.
When your daughter had this experience, she made mention that she didn't look at it, but did it look, or did she had a small glare? Did it perhaps maybe look canine? Because you did mention about the German Shepherd dog, and it does open up the thought process because of dogs picking up a certain frequency of a large predator, especially sun nearby in many Dogman cases.
Yeah, I think that she could relate it. That she could relate it to the only thing that she could think of, you know, that is here. That we have a lot of bears in Idaho, but that has a snout and something that's black. Is that she thought it was a black bear, and that's what her mind said. Because when we see something that we can't explain, or we see something that the numbers don't add up, or whatever, our mind automatically goes to something that we know what it is. So if you see something, she's like, it had a snout and it had ears, and she said its neck was really, really like massive neck. So she said, she looked like a bear. I'm like, okay. And when she said neck, I think, and I've dug her brain with this, that it was a mane. It was some kind of mane or something that it made its neck look big. And I'm like, well, maybe it was like some dogmen are reported to have manes, or kind of like a hyena type or whatever. But that's what she said, that its neck was massive, and maybe it was massive, and maybe it also was a mane or something.
There's been some cases where people have reported longer fur on dogmen, and there's been reports of it described as a mane. So there's been the hyena type that often has had the patches, but often has that African dog-looking structure to it. So if that is the case, then she may have seen a canine variant too, but then also it could easily have been possibly another variant. But point being, it is a very terrifying experience. Have you, or have you brought her or her in general returned to the site since?
Yeah, we actually have. I went there right after with the Fish and Game, and it was interesting because he's packing heat, right? And he's not going into the bush. He's just looking around. But yeah, we went down there in the daytime, and this was it was almost getting, it was like the sun was starting to set, but it wasn't dark. It was just, gives that really beautiful sunsets that we have here in Idaho, and on the canyons where you get to enjoy them the best. So yeah, we've been down there, and the creepy thing is, it's like I live so close to it, it's always on my mind. I'm always praying, thinking about it, trying to be prepared. And just a few days ago, my wife is like, my wife, she doesn't like to mess with any of this stuff. she's like a devout Christian woman, and has been raised in the church, and she doesn't like to anything that is a little sketchy or anything that's a little uncomfortable. She just really prefers to stay away from it. And so she tells me, I'm out. She's a teacher, by the way, and she's doing, with the whole COVID thing, she's doing her work on her computer, teaching her class, and she's recording a video for her class, and she says in her peripheral vision, she's seeing something black, and she described it as a black German Shepherd, or like a some kind of. She says she's seen the pointed ears, the head, rise up above the fence in our backyard, and she looked and it was gone. But our fence is taller than me. I can't even see over the fence. I don't even think I can if I jump. But she said it popped its head over, and she looked and it was gone. And she goes more into the paranormal side of it. It's like this is something spiritual because it's. She goes, how can it be there 1 second, gone the next? And my kids have heard loud banging on that fence all around. They said it was like somebody was hitting the fence all around it. And I said, well, maybe on one side. They're like, no, because when you shut the gate to the fence, it's really loud. And I was here in my man cave doing something, and they came running in. I could hear them screaming, and they said that it sounded like it was all around my fence just shaking. And so weird stuff is happening.
I want to ask you a series of questions on it, but the first big question would be, your wife had mentioned that it could be something spiritual. Now, often in many cases, there have been some who have had subsequent Dogman encounters. One might be a couple miles away from home, could be even 100 miles away from home, and then it happens to follow and has some sort of connection. Do you personally believe that this is something spiritual, or do you believe that this could be some sort of attraction that it's drawn to you or your family?
Well, this particular subject, Chris, has I've really dug into my faith. I've really dug into my heritage. I've thought about all different aspects and different, like what's going on here. And honestly, I'm really caught in between. Is I one moment I think like, oh, it's a physical thing, right? Because it leaves footprints, right? It leaves footprints on my roof, and it goes in the canyon. And we're going to talk a little about some stuff we've seen in the canyon on Halloween night, but I think it's physical. And then moments I'm like, no, how it has to be like a demonic thing or something, like something creepy. But I believe that there's maybe two different categories. Like one is a flesh and blood creature, and then there's a manifestation of something that is like a either demonic or it's from another realm, or something weird that I'm not 100% sure, because they do stuff that are not normal, like no other animal. I don't know of any other animal that gets pissed off that you're in its area and it follows you home and it harasses you, and it scares your kids, and it does weird stuff and bangs on your fence, and just weird things like that. So I'm like, man, I'm caught in the middle, honestly, Chris. I know that there has to be a physical aspect to it, but then there's a spiritual too. So I'm like torn between it. And I shared on the last episode one of the encounters that we had in Hays County, Texas, with the baboon. Well, let me share some with you. My aunt in Hays County had a boyfriend, and this guy, he was he was a different guy, but I had a dog, a pit bull, and its name was Diablo, which is Spanish for devil. And this dog used to be a fighting dog in Texas. They used to fight pit bulls for money, and this dog won so many fights that he basically won his freedom. And so he was a vicious dog. Nobody could feed him. I kept him on a chain. I could barely get close to him. Well, this guy looks at my dog and he tells me, he goes, "Your dog is a little punk." And I told him, "That dog will eat you alive." And he goes, and he walks to my dog, and he punks my dog out. He looks at my dog, and my dog bows down and like gets on his back. And I'm like, what the heck? I couldn't believe it. And he walked away, and he told me that when he was in Hayes County, that he saw a dog walking like a man. He says it was either like a wolf or a coyote or some kind of dog, a canine, and it was walking like a man, and it spoke to him in Spanish. That because he didn't know any English, and he says that they started talking in Spanish, and he says that it was in the desert in Hayes County, the desert part, and they parted ways. And he says ever since then that he's been able to read dogs, like he's been able to communicate with them. Weird. So that was pretty weird. But he did do that to that dog that was vicious. And so I'm thinking about it. I'm like, that has to be something spiritual, like, or something paranormal, or something, right? That no dog, what kind of canine can talk in Spanish, right? Well, it's really weird.
There's been often many times where people have had some sort of telepathic or some sort of small spiritual connection with a dogman, and often the comments of having some sort of communication barrier or something where not gifted but something weird. In this case, with this one guy who had seen a dog that was walking upright and spoke to him in Spanish, you can only think about South American like paranormal and type of mystics it brings. Now, being South American too, myself, I've often heard the cases of the voodoo. I've heard the cases of some of the curse and magic over there in a spiritual type sense. So it is a pretty scary thought, but what I'm getting at is that, do you think that there is some sort of case where there is a telepathic type of barrier here, where this dogman could perhaps be attracted to your property, you yourself, because of possibly the whole religious value? Because as you mentioned, you are divided between the whole flesh and blood and the whole supernatural side, as I am too. But do you think perhaps maybe because that there's that type of energy that it's just spiritually attracted?
Yeah, I really do believe that. I really, really do. Um, I told what we did a couple weeks ago was, after that my daughter had that encounter where she saw the creature. What I did was I went to my backyard, and I have a plum tree, and I broke some branches, and we made crosses out of those branches, and I anointed them with holy oil, and we prayed over them, and we buried them in the four corners of our property, and we just basically were asking for a hedge of protection upon our property. Like it would be sanctified, and I do believe that that we can, that some, like, it's something definitely that's attracted to me, because it followed me home. And I think about it, and we do a lot of paranormal stuff. There's, I've been, I am a pastor, so we know about the casting out of demons, attachments, family curses, all these things. And so I think about, like, man, it followed me. That's something weird. So I think it singled me out, and also, like, for my faith, like, it's either just, I believe, like, it's not going to be, I really do believe it can't hurt me physically. If it is a spiritual thing, it can only try and scare me and harass me, and but I don't believe that it would be able to do anything physical to me. Am I going to risk it? Am I going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to test that? I really don't want to, but I believe, like I have a hedge of protection around me, and it's just going to harass me and try and, scare the hell out of me, which it has, which it has to my wife and my kids. So I do think that, yeah, like, it follows me, and it wants to just scare me because it knows I'm a man of faith.
That's an interesting point too, because when it comes to religion and when it comes to these creatures, there's been always that type of protocol of curiosity, and also in the faith of where they could be and what they are. And in this case, it's almost like a test, but at the same time, it's one that you don't want nothing to happen, either or. and I'd be glad to sit down and talk with you at the end of the show and recommend some things, as well as also to get in touch with certain people if you're interested in about this case, because it is interesting, to say the least, that there is this activity going on. But it's also a safety measure too, because I mean, it's not like you wanted to bring this creature into your life. It was just a spark of a coincidence in a way. And I would think personally that something of this nature is definitely bonded to you, and hopefully there could be a nice resolution, because right now it just sounds, just in my opinion, it sounds more like it is curiosity, that it is attracted in a sense, and I might be using the wrong word, but it just sounds like it might be just intrigued with you, and just talking about what we've spoken of and what you've spoken of with the faith and with the belief. And of course, that is something too that's been drawn with many people who've seen Dogman. But it
You
is.
know, it's I respect that because I make some badass barbecue in my backyard, and I think like, man, this creature smells my briskets, he smells my pork butts, my chickens, all this. 'Cause I'm really big into cooking, into baking and grilling, all that good stuff.
Mm.
And so I really it's curiosity could be a big part of it. And just so you know, and like our listeners know, our area is really, really, really strange. Those of you who follow the missing 411, just a couple hours from my house is where the documentary film was made, with David Paulides in Pocatello and Idaho Falls area with the missing kid over there. And I think about it, like there's clusters in Idaho. There's a lot of people, a lot of hunters come up missing. They're never seen again. They're healthy. They're experienced. I have a family member well, through my mom, through marriage, right? A little 2-year-old came up missing here in Gooding, Wendell area, which is little tiny towns right around the lava caves and all that. Like he came up missing, and the dog. I remember and he's still on there. His name is Ruben, and he's still on the missing Idaho kids. And the dogs. I remember following it. The dogs tracked him over a railroad crossing that was like probably a quarter mile away, through a field, through an abandoned stockyard, and the trail disappeared at the river. And they dismissed it and said, "Oh, the kid fell in the river," and that's what they said on the news. But they didn't say that it was like a mile and a half away, and he was 2 years old. 2 years old. So it was really weird for him to move that far as a little baby. And then we have the missing 411 film that was made just not too far from me. So I think about all this stuff, and it's like, man, this is really weird.
That is pretty crazy. I did not know about that, the missing 411 around that area. That was crazy. And also, too, with the film, that's a nice piece of trivia I had no clue on, but also, too, at the same time, that is pretty creepy considering the fact that you're having this activity and that piece of detail was thrown in there. It's very coincidental and a bit ironic in a way.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. When I started researching all this, I wasn't really freaked out. When they say the more you know, the worse off you are. When I was I believed like, there's Bigfoot, and maybe there's a werewolf or something. As a kid, you like all this stuff, but then when it becomes real, and then you start researching and you hear people's encounters, you look at like the missing 411. These are facts, like all these things, and you're like, man, and you happen to live right in the middle of all of it, and it's really it's the pucker factor is real around here. I just want to say that.
I can agree 100%. But definitely with that situation that just happened recently, I would like to hear more. Please keep me updated on it, because that to me is something that I would definitely be keeping an eye on. Not the fact, too, that if it is what we've been talking about, the curiosity factor and something of interest in the spiritual sense, that is a pretty heavy thing right there. And it is something that's almost not life-changing, but definitely is mind-boggling in a way.
Yep, I agree, man. It's changed me. like I said on the last encounter, I mean, when I go to throw the garbage out at night, Chris, or to go get something in the car or whatever, I mean, I'm sketched out. I'm tripping. I'm like looking to the left of my front door is the canyon. So I'm looking in that area, right? And I'm always like, man, this is weird. And then I get back inside of my house and I get mad at myself. I'm like, why am I so scared? Like, why do I get fearful? And then I begin to pray and I begin to think about like the foundation of my faith. And I'm like, you know what? This is just a tactic of the enemy, you know? And yeah, they get the pheromones come out of my body or whatever, you know, and they get their fill. If it's something spiritual that wants my energy in that moment, they may get it. But I stay strong, and my family, like we're a tight knit family, and we have each other's backs, and we just try to take it day by day over here.
And that's the only thing you can really do. And considering the fact that when it comes to that factor of putting out garbage at night, don't get me wrong, I mean, I've never had a Dogman encounter or anything in a Bigfoot encounter, but I can imagine that when it's dark out at night and when you're taking out the garbage, anybody would be terrified. I am, only because, like, I don't know what's out there, and I live in an area where there's not a lot of woods, but across from me is woods. So personally, I mean, I it's totally normal. I would be freaked out myself, especially for where the sake being is that Dogman could pop at any second, you know?
Yeah, thank you.
I'm curious, though, of this Halloween encounter that you guys had. I mean, Tiberius and Lobo, I must say, I mean, personally, it sounds to me like this one, I know I've been curious to hear about it, but I'm gonna give you guys the floor with this one. What happened and what was the outcome? What we got here?
Well, I'm going to start it, and I'm going to let Tiberius take it. I just want to say one more time that what we did was so stupid, but it was a lot of fun again, and we don't recommend anybody to do it. And the thing, I just want to say what started it off is I took a Mega Blast speaker out there, and I had some Dogman Howl recordings, and we blasted them through the canyon at night with this loudspeaker, and that's what set off our night. And then we started. And so I'll let Tiberius go on to say what happened, and we definitely got what was coming, because that was so stupid for us to go at midnight on Halloween and play Dogman Howls in the canyon.
This is Tiberius. Lobo and I, we were trying to figure out what our next adventure was, and I don't remember if it was his idea or my idea, but I used to, as a young kid, 16, 17 years old, I used to go and investigate places where a lot of occult activity has gone on. I've got a history of that in my family, and so I've always gone out and found places and done some spiritual things to try to, I'm going to put it in terminology that maybe our audience can relate to, trying to ward off the evil and deal with the evil that's in the land when there's atrocities done. In our faith, we believe that the land holds record of that. And so we go and we pray and we try to, dismantle that thing in that area. So I don't know if it was Lobo's idea or mine, but we were talking about, let's go on Halloween night. And we took a young man with us who at the time was working for the Idaho Department of Fish and Game, and we're going to call him Young Atlas just to protect his future and things like that. And when we went down there, we also played, there's a famous Sasquatch howl called the Siren Call, and it's supposed to be of an alpha Bigfoot challenging anybody in the area. We also played that as well, which is really stupid.
Very stupid.
Now, and the other thing is, Lobo and I, we drank a few tall boys before we went, which was dumb. And so we went down there, and we weren't drunk, but we were feeling pretty good. And what we were trying to do was scare anybody in the canyon that was doing anything stupid on Halloween night, Again, like I said, I investigated in my past as part of society, not as for the government or anything like that, but I would investigate paranormal things, and occultic things because I dealt with a lot of, through the church, I dealt with a lot of people that were in the occult and trying to be freed from that. So I'm curious in my area what's going on in the land and what's happening. So we go down, all three of us go down there. We've got Lobo's speaker that's connected to his phone through the Bluetooth, and we both have powerful spotlights. At the time, I'm always packing. I'm always carrying heat. And at the time, I was carrying a 40 Smith & Wesson, and it holds 14 rounds. And I had, I think, 36 rounds on me, and Lobo was packing a piece as well. Young Atlas wasn't. And we went down to the canyon, and we started playing the howls from these Dogman encounters that people had had and recorded. And then we tried to play the Bigfoot siren call. And when we were down there, the whole area was quiet, and it was pitch black. And after the first howl, we could see some movement to the right side of us, which where the creek is, versus the left side, which is the canyon wall where we came down the path. And of course, young Atlas, he's experienced a few things of his own. He's had some Sasquatch encounters as a child, rocks thrown at him, things like that, and he's seen some questionable things. So he's aware, but he's never had a sighting like we have, or like he was about to have. And him working for the state, for Idaho Fish and Game, you know, they know all the animals that are out there that is around the normal public. He's an accomplished hunter, backwoodsman, you know. And so we're with spotlights looking around. We'll turn the lights off and wait and listen, and then howl or do a wood knock, or we're just having fun. And when we started hearing multiple large creatures running through raspberry thickets, tall wetlands with, you know, the cattails and things like that. Things similar to what you find in Florida, like the palmetto leaves and things like that. We've got some vegetation down there that's really thick, and we can hear things running through. Long story short, we were into this almost 2.5 to 3 hours before we left. We came to our senses, and we just hightailed it out of there. And we're down there, and we're hearing something on our two creatures on our right and one on our left, and they're almost paralleling us. All of a sudden, we hear this big kabloosh. Now you got to understand, the creek is running less than 30 to 40 feet on our right side, and then there's a good portion of land in this canyon on the other side of that is overgrown and thick. And I looked at Lobo and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he says, "Yeah." He says, "What do you think that was?" I said, "That was a boulder." You know, as kids, you ever throw big boulders in the water? And what was really funny is the next day we went back and we found a boulder that had been thrown in the creek. And this is a small creek with areas that are pretty, you know, 3 to 4 feet deep, and others it's pretty shallow. And we know the creek pretty well, but we believe we found the boulder that was thrown because about the proximity that we were at and where the boulder was thrown, young Atlas, all of a sudden, I had my light to the right of us looking along the creek. Lobo starts freaking out. He's screaming, "I see eyes shine, I see eyes shine." I'm thinking, oh, there's a deer or something like that. And then young Atlas began to scream, "I see it, it's huge, it's huge." And he starts crying. Full-grown man starts crying. He is terrified. And I'm looking, and I didn't get to see the eye shine. I didn't get to see it. But Lobo says that he believes that the thing was standing in the middle of the creek, down, bent over, and then when it stood up, because Lobo was down almost on his knees looking through the foliage, young Atlas was to his left and was in a clearing. He was less than 40 to 50 feet away from where this thing stood. And he told me that later on, when he got his wits about him, when we got back to the house, he was telling me that he thinks that between the eye shine, between the eyes, there must have been 4 to 6 inches of space. And then he said this thing had to have been 800 pounds or bigger from the outline we saw on the eye shine. And then it just kind of stepped out of view. The very next day, we went there and we found a sandbar that this thing had been stepping on. and it was marked up. There wasn't any visible prints, but you could see that it had been disturbed. So after we see the creature, whatever it was, and somebody says, well, that could have been a raccoon in a tree. No, this young man was in a clearing where there was no trees within 25 to 30 feet. Lobo was on his right, young Atlas was on Lobo's left, and they both got a different perspective of this creature. Again, I didn't see it, but I heard it walking on the other side of the creek in the thick foliage. And then I said, guys, we probably should get out of here because young Atlas is freaking out. He's in panic mode. He's about ready to pass out. So we take him. I'm on one side and Lobo's on the other. And I said, let's go through this little thicket area where we found tracks on our way out. And as we're walking, now you got to understand, I've hunted all my life. I've been in the backwoods all my life. I know animals. I know deer. I know, what's around. Young Atlas starts screaming again. He's looking to his right, and I flip it over, and less than 10 feet away from us is more eye shine. But at this time, it is a full-size adult male buck mule deer. And this buck had to weigh close to 150, 170 pounds. But its back left leg had been almost ripped off, and it was just dangling. And this thing was trying to... It was like twisted off. It hadn't been hit by a car, and it couldn't because there's no cars down in the canyon. And it's not trying to run from us. So I look at the guys, and I said, guys, I think we interrupted a hunt. We are in danger. We need to get the hell out of here. And from that point on, we were paralleled and followed out of the canyon, and we got back to our vehicle, and then we got back into where we felt somewhat safe. And that was pretty much the encounter on Halloween night. And young Atlas is now a believer.
I'd imagine after seeing eye shine and seeing a giant creature on top of that, seeing a giant buck with literally its body almost torn apart by this dogman or a whole bunch of them. And that is a good example of personally what a lot of the things that bump into the night, as they say, take place. Because I think for anybody out there who's had campfires or those who've had dogman encounters or have done, like just in general, been out camping and they've heard things, it's terrifying to say the least that you hear things, but then also to have to witness seeing, like literally nature torn apart by something out there that's a whole lot vicious. And it's not like your average bear that does that either. I mean, clearly the way it was described, it does sound almost as if Dogman was just trying to rip its leg apart.
I think about this, and that boulder that was thrown, guys, I just, those of you who are listening, who, if you've thrown a rock in a river and the river's not that wide, it's like it's a narrow river, but it was a boulder. I mean, this splash, it was freaking massive, and right there, it freaked us out, and instantly we have guns loaded, we're pointing in that direction, which we don't recommend, which we don't normally do, but we knew something was up, and then when we saw the buck, you guys know, like, these Idaho bucks are massive.
They're huge.
They're huge. The huge antler rack, and it's just a massive buck, and its leg is twisted off, like it's hanging. Like I think about it, I'm like, what animal what can twist a limb off? It has to have hands. And and I don't recommend this, but if you try to grab a mule buck, or grab one of these here in Idaho, you're probably going to go to the hospital, or Tiberius and I will be doing your funeral, one or the other. And it's like hanging off, and it's not trying to run away. And so we knew, like, something was up, like something was pretty sketchy. And like on the last episode, we shared about the wolf prints, or the canine prints, huge, that are just massive, and they're following these bucks into the trees. And we found those huge footprints, and we've also found tents, like campsites, that are shredded. Tiberius found a tent that was shredded, and the campsite was thrown everywhere, and there was casings to a 38 caliber that were around this campsite, and there was no person around, and we would find shoes, a pair of pants, a hat thrown in the tree, a jacket thrown in, weird stuff.
Baby stroller thrown up in
Like
a tree.
baby strollers thrown in the trees, and then the next day it would all be gone. It would just be gone.
So that the picture of the tent that was in the last episode that you put there, Chris, that was a picture in the sleeping bag that I took of this tent that looked like it. You know, I've done a lot of camping. This tent was secure on the ground. It looked like something just grabbed it and ripped it and pulled it. And my wife, my 10-year-old daughter, and myself were down there when we found that, and I started taking pictures. I went back the next day, and the site was cleaned up and spotless.
When you guys, to me, in my opinion, I think that you guys are very lucky that you just had a brief run-in with these things, and it was that, because it sounds like with all these campsites that you guys run into, and I saw the photograph too, it was pretty interesting to see a torn up campsite like that, and that's a first of my kind of seeing a campsite that disarrayed, or at least sent to me. So when you guys are out and you see these places, is there any signs, any traces of blood, any traces of hair? Do you smell any mysterious odors?
Well, just so you know, like this area right here where we do it, there's a lot. It's like a swampy, so there's generally like a putrid smell. But honestly, I've found fur down there, but I've never seen blood. I haven't seen blood, and my thought was like, what, when this campsite is tore up and is shredded, and there's bullet casings around it, and there's no blood, there's no people, no bodies, nothing. It's like, well, whatever it was, like my mind says, like it was like a spiritual thing or something, like something that doesn't bleed. Because I've heard those stories of people shooting, Dogman and Sasquatch sometimes, and they don't bleed, they don't stop, and maybe this person tried to shoot it, and it grabbed them and ran off with them, and there was no blood around, or like I don't know, like we don't know exactly what that means. And we did find one time a tree that was about probably 12 to 15 feet up this tree. It was just shredded, like if you took like a chainsaw or something and you just tore it up, and it was way up there. It was like, whoa, like looks like something like a Alaskan brown bear would do.
It was above 6 foot tall, and it was probably about 7 to 8 feet long, and probably about 8 inches width. And I can get those pictures to Lobo, so he can send those to you if you're interested in seeing those ones too.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the campsites that you visited, or at least a lot of the places in that area, they do have to seem some sort of large predator that's nearby. And it's not a bear. I don't think a bear, when I was looking at that camp photograph, a bear doesn't look like it would tear apart a campsite just like that. Something definitely much larger and bigger tore apart that campsite. And also, too, when you look at trees and other places in that particular area, there's a lot of disarrayment. So there's definitely large predators, it sounds to be, in this area, and it just happens to be in the span of just coincidence. But as researchers, how do you guys feel about exploring this area particularly, knowing that these creatures are out there and that you're coming across things that literally could be anybody in a sense of danger?
Well, that's where we say the stupidity comes into play, because I think about all the stuff that I've gone through and being here, and this encounter on Halloween was last year, and it just, I don't know, it's just pretty, it's hard to explain, because you live there. I mean, what do you do when you live there? And just so you guys, people who are listening, if you don't know what a Russian olive tree looks like, it's like a if you could picture the movie The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit with the root systems and these trees that
Grown gnarly.
they're overgrown and they just grow in every direction. And I mean, it'll cross over the river. One branch of a tree is so long it'll cross the river, and so it's pretty cool. You go down there and it's like, wow, this just looks like it's from the movies or something, And but we live there, and that's what is. I mean, what do you do? If I want to go fishing or camping, then I've made that decision. Am I going to stay at home and not go out? I live in Idaho. We fish, we camp, we hike. I go down the street and people come from all over the world to visit this canyon. And the Shoshone Falls, which is called the Niagara of the West. It's a huge waterfall. I mean, massive. People come from all over the world to see this, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go for a hike. I'm gonna go for a walk. I'm gonna go enjoy the beauty of it, and the Lord's got my back. And yeah, I might be packing a Glock or two. So what? Just to be careful.
Yeah, for me, I refuse to allow fear to rule me or dictate my life. I've been through a lot of amazing things and seen a lot of amazing things. I've traveled the world many times over. So I refuse, number one, I refuse to teach my children to live in fear, and I choose to back my neighbor. And number two, I feel like I have a responsibility to let people that want to listen and hear what is out there, number one. And number two, I'm not going to give this stuff any ground. I definitely am very cautious. I definitely do pray. I do listen to my conscience or the sixth sense, whatever you want to call it. But I've also taken precaution that I've got a 10 millimeter on order, and I've got a 300 short wing mag that a friend of mine up in British Columbia, who's a guide for the last 25 years of his life, he uses on Alaskan bear hunts and things like that. So I've definitely got the firepower, and I know how to use it, and I usually have something on me. Do I place my trust in that? No. I place my trust first in the Lord Jesus Christ, who I serve, and then I trust my senses and my experience. And then with those that I invite to go out with me, my life is in their hands as well as their life is in my hands as well. And I always got a sticker of some kind of a strange symbol or a cryptid on this vehicle or that vehicle, and I've had dozens and dozens and dozens. Even my own father finally came to me and told me about an encounter when he lived at the edge of this canyon as it starts in Idaho in a town called Kimberly. When he was 5 years old, that he had an encounter with. And then now he lives in Wendell in Gooding County, where Lobo had talked about experiences that he's had an encounter with a creature that was similar, and he thinks it's, anyway, that we can get into that later if we have time. But I want to tell you a story real quick about on Thanksgiving this last year, my sister and her husband and 4 children came to visit, and I took 2 of my nephews because they are Sasquatch enthusiasts. And I said, guys, we got some encounters down here. We're going to go. I'm going to go down there, and I went down there packing. I took my 10-year-old daughter, and we went down there to look at the creek. And when we went down there, we did a couple wood knocks, and immediately on the left and then the right, we heard responses of wood knocks. And of course, my little nephew got really excited. He was 11 at the time. And he says, can I do a Bigfoot call? I said, yeah, give him whatever you think a Bigfoot call would sound like. And he's seen some of the popular shows, and he did that. Well, we got a response. And so I didn't go too far in the canyon. And the kids began to see, we saw 6 does run out of the bushes from one side of the river to our side. And then they saw some movement in the bushes. We turned around and we walked out. And as we were walking out, we probably heard, from the time we got there to the time we got back to the trailhead, 4 sets of distinct wood knocks. And so, again, it's just interesting the activity that's down there.
Real quick, Chris, I just want to confirm this, the activity that is here. So those who are listening, we're only a few hours from Skinwalker Ranch here where we live. You know, we go all the time to Utah, which is not far from us, and we go, we go to Salt Lake area, and we go down farther, and we go have, there's some awesome amusement parks over there and whatnot. And they do cool Halloween. The whole amusement park is a Halloween theme, so we go down there a lot, and we have our family vacations over there, and you can go and come the same day. So we're not far from Skinwalker Ranch, so just so you know, like this whole region right here is really really creepy. And 30 minutes from us is Jawbridge, Nevada, and this canyon, which is the same canyon system. There's the story goes, which the name of Jawbridge is. Can you say the name of it real quick?
The Indian name is Tuahabits, and that's been pronounced in the English Jawbridge.
Say two Wahhabits. I can't even say that right. But what it means is it's like the man-eating giant,
Canyon
and
giant.
the canyon giant, and this giant would hunt the natives, and it would eat them, and it would make these baskets out of this wood or whatever. It'd make these baskets, and it would catch them and put them in this basket, and it would eat them. And these natives just had enough of it, and so I guess they tracked it to its cave, and they burnt it, like they smoked them out, or they burnt them or something. They killed this giant, and Tiberius and I went down there, and this was our first trip, and
with our wives, and
yeah, it was pretty cool. We just went, we found a bunch of artifacts and stuff, and there's these mines, because it was a mining area. There's mines down there that we've gone to the rim of those, and we've looked in there, and it's like they go for, I mean, who knows, right? Do you guys know that the lava ice caves here, 20 minutes from our house, is the largest lava ice caves in the world? In the world. Google it. You guys Google it. It's the largest lava ice caves in the world. And so there's the cave systems is just intense. It's just hundreds of miles. And so we heard humming down there, just weird stuff. So the area, I mean, we have Jawbridge, the largest lava ice caves in the world, the deepest gorge in the United States. We have Skinwalker Ranch. We have all these weird things, and that's what we're saying. Like, we live here, right?
It's a big heartland for cryptids and a lot of activity on your end, so it seems. And I think for you, I mean, as what you put it best, you seeing it, and I mean, how do you feel as a person, though? I mean, is it something that like is enjoyable in a way, or something that is very curious and it's almost thrilling in a way? Because for me, it would be thrilling to have all that.
It is thrilling, and it is exciting. I mean, if you think about it, because I mean, right now the government, the system says you stay in a box. We tell you what is real. When scientists affirm that it's discovered, then it's real. The giant squid, it was seen as a myth with all the maps of it grabbing ships and all that. All these creatures and animals were seen as myths, as folklore, and they discover them, but they're not seen as real to the general public until the mainstream scientists say they're real. And so we're here telling you guys, no, these things are real, and for whatever reason, for economic reasons or who knows what, spiritual reasons, they're not telling you that these areas, these things are real. And it is exciting because it's like we live here. I mean, we can drive a couple hours and we can investigate Skinwalker Ranch. We go 30 minutes from my house. We're at Jawbridge, Nevada, where that giant was at. And we could look at those, the mines, and we can go 20 minutes north and we go to the largest lava ice cave in the world. Just 15 minutes from my house is the deepest gorge in America, right? And that's not including all the mountains and the pine trees and all that. I mean, so yeah, I guess you could say where I live is pretty exciting.
And for me, I grew up in this kind of environment, whether experiences with what you'd call gnomes or elves or little people, or the Sasquatch encounters or shadow people, things of the occult. I grew up in that world. My children have grown up in that world. I've got a story that in 1998, I was married in 97. In 98, my wife was a new mother. Our oldest boy at the time was 6 months old, and I was in Germany, Poland, and Russia doing some missionary work. And my wife we had a little house that was part of the church. It was a parsonage because I was pastoring at the time. My wife had put the baby to bed, and she went to lay down in our bedroom because the baby's little bed was there too, the bassinet. And she had an encounter where she woke up and she had the most horrible terror that she's ever felt. She felt like she couldn't scream or move. The only thing she could move was her eyes. And it was like something was like choking the life out of her. She couldn't hardly breathe. And then she looked over at my son, my oldest boy, who was 6 months old, and there was a 4-foot tall, gray-looking, slimy-looking, big-headed, bug-eyed creature that was touching my son. And then when it noticed that she was looking at it, it went over to her. And as it's looking at her and touching her, she is so paralyzed with fear. She begins praying in her mind, and that begins to loosen the power on her. And when she cried out the name of Jesus, this thing screamed and disappeared. And my wife ended up calling her sister, and her sister came and spent the night with her. So again, we've had some, I don't know what you want to call that. Some people call it an alien encounter. But so these are the things that my children have seen and lived through, and we've been a part of. And being in the church, seeing a lot of occult things happen, and then people trying to lead those things and helping people with the right steps for their safety and their protection. I'm in a different season of life right now. So there's no normalcy of my life. It's always a new adventure every morning. Especially when I started with the agency I'm with. In the first 6 months of working, the administrator for the region pulled me in his office and says, "Toby, what kind of territory do you like to live in? Do you like to live in the desert, the mountain?" I said, "I love tall timber, thick brush." I said, "What about you?" He says, "Oh, hell no." He said, "There's things in the woods that'll snatch you. They'll hide behind a tree." They call him the booger man in the South, and which I've now come to know that they call them boogers, the Bigfoot boogers. So it was really interesting that the administrator of our region had this conversation with me. And I don't talk about this stuff at work. I'm very careful. And then another time that I had was I was with one of our top scientists. This guy's got 3 PhDs. He's smart. He's a chemist. He's got a PhD in as a medical doctor. He's also got a PhD in music. And he's almost 80 years old, and he's getting ready to retire. I think he's actually 76. But one day he was telling me, he says, "Toby, there's a certain mountain with a mine in it. Tiberius, there is a certain mountain with a mine, and it's called Triumph Mine." And he says, "You're going to be responsible for that mine. You're going to be responsible for watching it." And I says, "Why is that?" He says, "Well, we are currently pouring a concrete vault over where the portal is." I said, "Over the what?" He goes, we're injecting concrete into this crevice to seal it up so none of the poisons come out of it and hurt the environment around us." And so I asked him about that portal, and he retracted what he said. And so it's just interesting, these different encounters and information that comes out.
And that's something, too, I wanted to get your opinion on, Tiberius, because we was talking prior to the start of the show in reference to some of these pieces of information that seem to be transmitted to you that almost backtrack to them in a way that seem like they give away something that is kind of hidden. And have there been any other experiences where they've referenced anything cryptid-wise?
Yes, for some reason, a couple of the higher ups have known that I've been in the canyon, and they talk about the Rock Creek Sasquatch. And as a joke, they'll send me pictures of an ape. The last one I got was a picture of, have you seen that movie called Rampage, with that white grill, that huge white grill? One of my supervisors sent me a picture of that and said, "This is the latest picture of the Sasquatch, Rock Creek Sasquatch." And I thought, oh, okay, ha ha, very funny, that's hilarious. What's a Sasquatch? I'll ask him, and that's like, oh, come on, you know what that is, don't you? And I'll play stupid. But so that kind of stuff, I don't know if they're just playing with me or messing with me, or if they're trying to find out if I really know something, because I don't do social media. I've got one email address that's personal, and I've got one email for my job, and that's it. You can't find me on the World Wide Web. I just, a long time ago, I just dropped out of social media and things like that to just try to stay under the radar because of the things we deal with and things like that.
I strongly agree with that. I mean, everybody's entitled to it, but I can understand your reasons to it. But see, when you're looking back at it too, also when you have these higher ups and these guys who are kind of like just kind of throwing little balls at you with it, it sounds to me like they could either be curious of what you're up to, or they also too might be throwing it at you a bit because they know a thing or two that you may not know, particularly in the area.
I think it would be the second one, because these individuals, like I said, it's strange with the conversations that I've had and the emails that I've gotten. And
now, we also were curious of some of these other encounters that you guys have happened to collected locally. And what can you guys talk about with these encounters?
Well, I just want to apologize to everybody in advance for my massive protective dog that came running in my man cave. She's a she's a Chihuahua Shih Tzu mix, so she's tiny. She's like a burrito sized dog, but yeah, it's
man
funny
killer.
because I firmly believe even if it's her barking, it's a tiny little bark, but we've had her bark at the weirdest times, like at the ceiling and weird stuff. So, but after our local encounters, we have some pretty trippy paranormal stuff because Tiberius and I, being men of faith, we've seen our fair share of spiritual stuff. But I'm gonna let Tiberius kick it off with because he's got some pretty intense local encounters, and then I'll finish off with some too with some pretty crazy stuff.
So I'm a third generation Idahoan. My dad grew up in a small town called Kimberly, which is about 12 miles away from where we currently are right now. And Rock Creek Canyon from the South Hills runs directly through that portion of Idaho. My dad told me a story, and he just told me these stories recently because he's had some encounters in Wendell, Idaho, which would be northwest of us in Gooding County, where Lobo was talking about some of his encounters and stuff and with his family. But my dad told me that when he was between 5 and 7 years old, they lived on the outskirts of Kimberly. I mean, and they lived in an old farmhouse. It was called the Arnold House, and everybody in the neighborhood by 5:30, all the kids would be locked up indoors. All the animals would be put away. And I asked why. He said because there was something that would come up the tracks from the canyon, follow the tracks, and certain times of the year, and it would take chickens, take sheep, take, I don't know, dogs, cats. But he's had several encounters where he was looking out the picture window just as dusk was coming. Again, he's a little boy, and he saw what he would call the whistling bear. It was a bear walking on two legs, black. It had a pronounced snout, and it would whistle and click when it was out there. And he froze in terror. It horrified him. And so we've got that encounter coming in this. It seems like that this canyon and these mountains are some kind of a travel way for these creatures. Well, all things of flesh and blood need water, and I learned from the legend of Boggy Creek, the famous saying, "They always follow the creeks." I love that movie.
It's a classic.
And so now my dad, being in his mid-70s, I think he's 75 now. He grew up in the woods. He grew up around animals. He was a cowboy. And when he 4 years ago, when I moved him from the state of Idaho, Washington, to the state of Idaho, and they settled there in Wendell. My dad's got a little schnauzer that he takes for a walk, and they live on the almost the outskirts of town by where the old high school is, and there's a canal that runs through there. And my dad said that he was out there walking, and he said he had this fear that came on him like when he was 5 to 7 years old when he saw the whistling bear. And then he could smell a musky smell that was, it was like he said, it almost smelled like a bear, but it was almost like a husky. And then his little dog just got really nervous and would lay down and pee on itself, so he'd pick it up and he'd head back to the house. He'd pray, he'd grab a shotgun and sit out on the front porch waiting for whatever it was. Well, he's had 4 or 5 encounters of this, but what was really interesting is his latest encounter was when he was walking his little dog, he had that feeling come upon him again. And then for 3 blocks, he heard a series of dogs raising hell, trying to get away from something. And as this thing, and it was dark, he could hear something running and jumping fences, hitting the ground. And these dogs just going crazy, trying to get away. And then he heard this thing snort. And when it stopped, he felt like it was, whatever it was sizing him up. And he began to pray. And my dad, he's always packing too, but he said, Tiberius, I don't think I have anything in my arsenal that could have dealt with this. He said, I felt so intimidated. So he was able to get back to his house, and he said that feeling was just with him for most of the night until the morning light come. And for my dad to be scared of something, that is unusual because he was a very strong man growing up, and he had the reputation that he never had anything ever bother him or take control of him like that. And so those are just some interesting things that had happened with my family. My great-grandfather was Cajun from Louisiana and Arkansas, and he's told my dad stories of this wolfman creature that used to live in the bayous. And so I don't know of any other stories of his encounters. If he had any here, I don't know. But it's just like there's something in the family line, something in the bloodline. I don't know if it's connected to a bloodline, if it's connected to different things of faith. But some people go their whole lives without ever seeing anything. And then there are just some other people that are just, I would say, more sensitive to the supernatural or paranormal. And so it's just really interesting when Lobo and I started hanging out together and started sharing stories. It was like it was meant to be. Yes, we're here. Oh, yeah.
I have something to add on to that. So just thinking about it, this is, I don't know how common it is, Chris, of people giving locations and all that stuff, but I really am big on our location and property, the land, the ground. We that's why, me putting the crosses and burying them on our property, like, I believe that property and the ground itself holds memory and it attracts things and all these other things. But like people here in the towns that we're talking about, the locations, I just want to say, like, those of you who know where we're at, they're familiar with Idaho and this region and the Magic Valley and all these things, like, just please, if you're going to go out and do anything, don't go alone. If you're going to go investigate, or if you're going to go and try and experience something, don't go alone. And please, like, at least go packing something, right? Do something to protect yourself. And us, we're men of faith, and we believe this stuff, like, that we have dominion and authority over the creature of the world, and like that God has given us authority and power over spiritual things too. So anybody who's listening to this, like, we're mentioning all these towns and stuff, it's like, please don't do it. Like, we admit it, we openly admit it's stupid, And there's some stuff like like me personally, if you do this, you may have to pay the price. And unfortunately, I paid the price for it, right? I paid the price, but I believe like I'm okay. Like there's nothing that's physically happened to my family, and it's just part of the region we live in. Like I'm telling you, we're surrounded by it. Everywhere we go. I mean, there's people missing, there's creatures, there's UFOs, I mean, it's just nuts. And part of the when I first got into it, when Tiberius told me like, hey, it probably wasn't a juvenile Bigfoot that was on your roof, it was probably a Dogman. I started researching it, and then I'm looking on Dogman encounters, and I'm looking at the map of encounters, and I'm like, there's one that's just, I mean, it's like 15 minutes from my house in Henson, here in Idaho, Hanson, Idaho, and the encounters of this kid's in by Kimberly. This kid sees it, and and here in Idaho there's a lot of rabbits, and we go rabbit hunting at night. You get in the back of a truck, you go riding with a spotlight, and you shoot the rabbits, and you do it for sport, you do it for meat, you do it for dog food, all these different things. But he sees it, and he thinks that his dad is making, his dad is an avid Bigfoot hunter, or a believer, and he thought it was a Bigfoot. And he began to say, it had a big snout, pointy ears, long arms, and it ran on two legs. And he's like, no, that's a Dogman that you saw. And then in Boise, which is a couple hours from me, is another one, Stanley, where I had my Bigfoot encounters, where another Dogman encounters that. So it's like they're everywhere here. I think about it, and I'm like, man. So if you try to go out and find these locations, I think one thing is, like, if you want to go out of your area, your location to look for these, man, you better be prepared. Tell people where you're going. Yep. Don't go alone. Go packing. I mean, have some kind of faith, some kind of higher power than you. And we, as Tiberius and I we live it. We live it. It's just here. If we want to go down the street, it's there. If we want to go an hour away, there's always something, a rock's throw away, something creepy is happening here.
Chris, some of the pictures that Lobo sent you, please feel free to use them however you want to. Those I took when my wife and I went up to the South Hills where the Rock Creek Canyon flows from. We were about 3.5 to 4 miles up the ridge in the mountains along the lodgepole pines, where there was a small creek coming down, and we love to hike. My wife and I carry a personal locator beacon on us. My wife doesn't like firearms, so she doesn't carry one, but she carries a horn on her, one of those air horns, and you can go to your local Sportsman's Warehouse or Cabela's and buy the bear spray. And it's about $20-25, but I'm going to tell you what, it's better than nothing. And so we both pack, and then of course I always have some kind of a firearm on me, and we never go alone, because even though this is my backyard, I'm not gonna do something that is gonna really jeopardize my safety. I know some of the things we talked about have been kind of stupid, but one of those pictures that I sent you was a picture of a bear footprint up about 3.5 miles from any road. And I'm not saying what it is. I don't know.
He's not saying a bear as in like a brown bear or a black bear. He's saying like a barefoot, like somebody wearing no shoes.
And you can see toe marks, and it was crossing the trail. And I don't know how fresh it was because it rained the night before. So it could have been within the last 12 hours, I think. I don't think it was very fresh, but I think it was within the last 12 hours. And then we kept finding, and I think I sent those photographs to Lobo, of these branches from some of the birch trees that were like 4.5 inches in diameter, broken off, laying over the trail. And so I'm just reporting information I found. I'm not trying to say what I think it is. This is fact. This is what I do for a living. I investigate things, and I find it, and I report it, and that's it. And so I just thought, and then I wanted to give you guys some ideas of the surrounding country that we live in. And so it was an interesting trip. And that was yesterday. It was on Saturday that this happened.
It's pretty intense to have all this activity happen the way it plots out and how crazy it hits, and especially for both of you because of how you guys follow a certain belief and religion and your systems and whatnot. Personally, with all of this activity and everything that you guys have had and seen, for you, what would be the biggest piece of your research? What would be the big thing that you guys would want to have come out of all of this? What would be your goal?
This is Tiberius. I think my goal is I'm keeping a journal, and I'm trying to build some field knowledge of things as I go out in the next however long I'm here on this earth, and the wisdom that I have picked up. I'm hoping to educate people, number one, of what's out there and what could be out there, and number two, maybe some of the experiences that I myself or Lobo have had maybe can help people find closure to things that go bump in the night, can find peace, and possibly even save lives. I feel that because of the knowledge that I feel we've been entrusted, we have a responsibility to share it and to guard it. Our Bible, our holy book says, "Don't throw pearls before swine." In other words, something that is valuable to you, don't throw it to somebody that would not find any value in it, or would scoff you, or make fun of you. For instance, that Sasquatch sticker that I have on my truck, I had an audio engineer from a local church come and tell me about in the South Hills where we were just at. He said, "I don't believe in Sasquatch, but when we were camping with my family, I was sleeping in the top bunk. One came up, looked inside, shook the thing, shook the camper, and then walked off in the woods." He says, "I still have night terrors," and that was over 40 years ago. And over the last year that I've gotten to know this gentleman, he's finally said, the nightmares aren't as bad because I've talked to you a little bit about it, Tiberius. And so, you know what? I see that as a success. And if we can help him move forward, and this guy's a man of faith, this man's a good man, raised a good family, he just had an experience when he was younger that he could explain that did not fit in to his paradigm that has been painted to us by the powers that be. And I don't even pretend to know what's all out there and what the agenda is out there. I don't know. I've got a little bit of an idea, but I am in no way, shape, or form an expert, or really, I'm just a witness, a life witness. And if anything that I have can help somebody else, whether it's dealing with demonic possession, dealing with occult things, dealing with generational curses, dealing with orbs, I've seen those. When I was younger, I've had experiences with elves and little people and dwarves. And so, like I said, that's what we're here for, is to help one another and to be able to say, you know what, if that's what you saw, I believe you.
I just want to confirm that for everybody. It's like, there's so many people living in a box. And those of you who are listening, we may have some new people who are just, scrolling through it or whatever. I've been in that box before. I've been the one who's like, okay, this is what people tell me is real. This is what this person, the government, says is real. Okay, so this is what it is. But I want to tell you right now, God has given you freedom, right, that no man could take away. And he's given you a conscience. He's given you a mind to think for yourself. He's giving you an adventurous mindset. Like, if you go and investigate, seek the truth out. And so for me, being here in Idaho, and it's so, for me, it still baffles me. It's like, man, I don't know how it works, the odds that I'm right here in Twin Falls, Idaho, and I'm surrounded, and even down the street from my freaking house, But it's freeing, and I want to give people the freedom tool. It's like, no, search for it. Like, hey, there's more out there. It's, there, what the government says is real. It, challenge it. It's like, you have a conscience, you have a mind, think for yourself and search, research all this stuff. So if I could say anything, it would be for people to come out of the box and to look at the bigger picture, because things are real out here, guys. Like, it's real. And I'm really thankful for, especially for Tiberius, for, I mean, he's a freaking federal investigator, right? It's like, this guy's talking about portals and dogmans and Bigfoots, and it's like, it's here. People coming up missing, and I mean, it's real, but the man, you should say, doesn't want you to know about it. And so that's my thing, is like, I want people to know there's more than what you've been told.
And I'd like to add to that, I don't think it's just in this area. I think if we really open our eyes, look at the lores and the legends of the area you live in. Search those out. Search out the First Nations people. Right now I'm working with a program where I'm trying to be able to have an ability to begin to work with First Nations people because of what I do. I want to be able to help them and be a blessing to them because they've been hurt and taken advantage of, and their culture almost destroyed and decimated. I want to be a healing part of this for them. And so I'm working with special groups where I'm learning how to relate to these individuals, how to be sensitive, how to approach them, and to honor them. And in that, I'm hoping my journey will reveal some of their stories, because I've had the privilege to sit down with some Salish Indians from northern Washington, and very highly educated people. But they'll sit down and tell you their creation story. And in these stories, there's meanings. And because I was raised in a white culture, I don't necessarily understand it. So I have to ask them to forgive me and explain it to me because I don't understand. And I've learned some really, really interesting things and some truths that they knew about because they were here before the European settlers were. And so check out your local legends. Check out your family history. Check out the local tribes. Find out some of their stories. I think that can be very helpful.
It could be very helpful, and I just want to throw this out there, guys. I am really looking forward to the paranormal stuff, because this stuff is, again, it's like, I mean, we're not going to make this stuff up. I don't have time. I'm so busy. He's so busy. This stuff is just, this is what we're surrounded by, what we live in. I mean, it's pretty intense. But Chris, if you have any questions for us regarding this, we're open.
Well, when it comes down to it, I mean, I think you guys have a very good mindset, particularly on discussion of both the understanding of what these creatures are, what the protocol is, and you have a very good intelligent basis to both of you, too. I mean, speaking to you and hearing what you guys have to say about all this is truly interesting, and one of the more elaborate and very concrete interviews of speaking to somebody and just just two guys who have a life of their own, but also to have this interesting phenomena of encounters with seeing things and trying to get an idea on them. So you guys are very, I see it as almost like a blessing too in disguise, but at the same time also interesting to really just have all this happen to you, and you take the right precaution. You really do. You guys know what you're talking about when it comes to that. But I want to talk to you also about the whole paranormal, because we did also mention that. So, Lobo, when it comes to paranormal, what is it around this place that has truly sparked the interest, truly has been hidden hotspots?
Well, just, I want to remind people that, I'm from Mexican heritage, and, my family, we can be traced back to the Aztecs and to the Eagle Knights, the Jaguar Knights, where there's a lot of a warrior and curandero, which means it's basically witch doctors. And so my family is, it's pretty intense, and Tiberius, he has that too. So from us both being men of faith, just so you guys know, that this is pretty interesting. I think about it, just down the street from my house, okay? and this right here is going to freak people out, and this is not a lie. I've confirmed it from the mom and three kids and the grandmother from this home. And so you guys know, I'm a pastor here at a church, and we minister a lot. We go and we cleanse homes, we cast demons out, we counsel, all kinds of stuff. So, but one of the kids from my youth group, she comes and she's seeking counsel, and she comes to me, and she knows what we're about, and she says that. Well, let me backtrack. This girl's mom is she's Mexican heritage too, and she does a lot of brujeria, which is witchcraft, and she's a witch, and she practices the Christian faith. She's a Christian woman, and her backtrack where she falls back into the temptation. We all have our, we all fall short. We all have our, we try to do good, and then we have that one thing we go back to. Where hers is witchcraft, and she kept hexing her husband because he would cheat on her, and he would do these different things, and she would cast curses on him, and he'd go to prison for a couple years, and get out, and then go back and forth. It was just a big mess. So the grandmother, I went to their house for some, I can't remember exactly what I went there for. They're part of our church, and the grandmother tells me that her son is back in prison, and she believes that his wife is hexing him again. And so we pray for the home. They're all, and it's weird. I go there, and all the mirrors are broken. There's no mirrors in the house. They're all broken. And I asked why. She said that maybe her kids would tell me one day what it meant. And so I pray for the home. I put anointing oil on my hands, and we go and we lay hands on the walls, and I feel there's like a spirit in there. What I mean by that is, what a metal detector is. How you can get a metal detector and put it over the ground, and it senses where the metal's at, and it'll lead you to it. Well, that's how it is when I pray. And it's not me, it's the Holy Spirit is what we call it, because there's dark forces, and then there's the holy forces. And so the holy force within me, my hands get hot when I start getting in a close location of where the demon or the spirit is hiding. My hands get really, really hot, and I just follow that heat, and it either runs the spirit out, or I corner it and we cast it out, or whatever it may be. So I'm praying in the home, and finally I corner it, and I start praying, and it goes out the window. I feel it go out the window, and we cleanse the home. And about a month later, the kid who lived in that house, she came to me. She wasn't there that night when I did that. It was just the grandmother. She told me that she was sleeping, and she heard loud footprints, like stomping, like somebody's walking, but she said it sounded really loud, and she said it sounded like a goat or a horse or somebody with those olden day wooden shoes where they're really loud, those pointy shoes, those walking with those in the hallway. And she says that it goes to her door, and she could hear the doorknob move, and she hears the voice of her mom, and the mom is a practicing witch. And the mom says, "Open the door." And she's thinking, and she's like, "Wait a minute, Mom's at work right now. Mom's not here. Supposed to be here." And the doorknob moves again, and the voice says, "It's me. I'm not gonna say the name. The name is so and so. Let me in." And she knows immediately that something's not right. And all of a sudden, the voice gets deep, like a turns into a man's voice. And then it turns into a deep, deep voice, like a demonic voice, and it's pounding on the door and turning the doorknob, and it's not locked. It just can't come in. She's not letting it in. And so immediately she says she starts to pray in her mind. She starts praying, and all of a sudden it starts moving away down the hall, and it goes to her sister, and she's frozen in fear. She can't move, and it goes down the hall to her sister's room. And it does the same thing. She could hear her mom's voice in the distance, and she's crying. this girl's crying and she's hearing it. She's like, she can't move to help her sisters or her brother or anything. And then she hears it go to the next room, and she's telling me this, and I'm like, what? And both of the sisters are confirming it with me. The littler one said, yeah, I heard it too. Like, it came to my room and it was my mom, and it turned into a demonic voice. And the little girl too, the littler sister, started praying as well. She comes to our youth group as well. She started praying as well. And so I went to the other room where her brother was at, but the brother wasn't home. And it went into the room, and she could hear it like breaking stuff, like breaking mirrors. So they heard the mirror break, like glass breaking in the room, and then they heard it go throughout the house, and they could hear mirrors breaking, which is pretty trippy in itself. And so I hear that, and they're telling me, and I'm like, no freaking way. And so they're pleading, like, man, let's go, and what can we do? And they ended up getting evicted from this house for unforeseen circumstances, which is weird. The bank, something happened with the bank. Well, they were struggling paying the payments, and something happened, and the house was foreclosed. So I went back there, and it's all off. Like, you can't even go inside. The windows have the wood on them. The doors are locked. You can't even look in the windows. Like, either I didn't confirm it, but it seemed like the glass was broken on the windows itself, and they were all boarded up. So I never went in, but I prayed over the property, and that's the story that she told me, and that literally is down the street from my house, and which is so weird. And so that's one of the stories that I have. And if you have any questions, or I know Tiberius has more, and I have a lot more, which are they're going to get really, really creepy, just so you know. But I mean, it is what it is.
With the occurrences of what they were hearing, had there been any specific update? Have you heard from them since in terms of this particular incident?
Out of this particular incident, the son who was in prison, I ended up finally meeting him because I never met him, and he was able to tell me and ask for prayer, but he did not want to open up about any witchcraft or hexes going on in the family. So I just did a prayer of hedge of protection for him. And the interesting thing is, the girl who first told me this, she just texted my wife yesterday and said that she's moving away from the state of Idaho. Like, she's moving. She's not here. And so I asked, like, why? I'm like, why is she leaving? Like, I want to find out why. And my wife's like, oh, she didn't say why. She says she's gonna go with some family in San Antonio in Texas. And I'm like, wow, the odds of that. I'm like, I've lived in San Antonio. I've lived all in that area right there, that strip of Texas, and she's moving over there. She hasn't left yet, but she's leaving. So I have yet to touch base with her and find out why she's leaving the state.
Yeah, that is something, and hopefully for the best. I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of intense situations going on in that household, and if anything, it could have escalated. If not, possibly it did behind the scenes. But I mean, that's just brutally terrifying to have such an occurrence like that occur.
Yeah, these kids I mean, my heart goes out to kids. I think personally, if I don't really get out of character, Chris, but if somebody tries to hurt a kid or to do something evil or something that's dark to a child, that's where I don't mind. I will physically hurt somebody. I'll even have to, if I have to end somebody, I'll do it, because my perspective is something or somebody who could hurt somebody innocent, little. It's demonic. It's like dark, It's like a predator, and so me, I get really. I mean, I get defensive, and that really bothers me in a special way. Like, I can be passive and graceful and merciful, but when it comes to people hurting kids, I mean, I will I mean, you want to see me go to the next level. And the interesting thing is her going to San Antonio, to Texas, me growing up in Austin and Hayes County, the lechuza, which is in the Hispanic term, which is a witch. It's a owl that transforms. It's basically a skin changer or a shapeshifter that changes into a witch. It's like a human that changes into an owl. And they in my neighborhood, they said if you heard whistles, don't whistle back, because it's a lechuza, she'll grab you and take you or whatever. And the story of that goes, my grandpa had a couple chickens on our property, and the chickens would come up missing over there. And he was always, like, why the hell are my chickens? Because we love the fresh eggs. And so what he did is he got this chicken that he found that was dead, and it was shredded. It was just shredded completely, and he took the remains of it and he wired it to the top of our fence with chicken wire on top of the tall fence. And I remember at night sleeping and hearing a shotgun blast. I heard a shotgun blast and it woke me up, and I heard another two shotgun blasts, and everybody ran outside. And my grandpa had a spotlight. He was waiting. I mean, think about this. He's waiting at 2 in the morning in the dark, hiding in the shadows with a shotgun, waiting for something. And on my last encounter, they'll know why, or the last episode, they'll know why, like what happened over there. Like my grandpa was so paranoid. But he said, I remember going out and seeing an owl with its talons still on the chicken, and it was upside down. The kids, he killed it, but his talons didn't leave grip. It was still hooked on the chicken. And he's like, oh, I finally found the culprit or whatever. It was an owl, tecolote, And I remember thinking, that's a freaking lechuza, like it's a witch, But I didn't say anything, and so I go to school the next day. I'm like 8 or 9 years old, and I get off the bus, and there's a giant fire pit, and it's all burnt, and there's remnants of bones in there. And my aunt tells me that it was the lechuza, the owl that they killed the night before. And they said that when it was dead, and when they lit the fire, they threw it in the fire, that it came back to life, and it started to scream and flap its wings. And when the wings burnt off, that it looked like a little old woman, that it was like a human, like a little tiny miniature human, and that it was a lechuza, that they finally killed one. And I remember seeing it was serious. Like it was real, like it was no joke. They weren't laughing, they weren't playing, and all in the neighborhood, everybody knew that my grandpa killed a lechuza. And they came and they gave him offerings, like they would give him food. People in the neighborhood would give him a goat and all these different things as gifts for it. That he took one of them out, and it was weird. And so that's part of the starting of the paranormal with me living in Texas.
Yeah, that is a very interesting case nonetheless, especially with some of the shape-shifting type methods, preferably. But what are some of these other cases that you've collected or heard about paranormal-wise?
This is Tiberius. When I first moved to Idaho, I was getting ready to go to a seminary school in Texas. It was 1994, and I was in England at the time on a mission, and I met a pastor that was over there that was from Twin Falls, the city that I was born in. And we did some work together, and he said, if you're looking to go and get trained in the ministry and go to some type of a schooling, he says, we've got one down in Twin Falls. And I thought, oh, wow, how convenient. I got family in Twin Falls. I don't have to go to Texas now. I can go to where I was born or my family. I'm familiar with the area. So I went and I moved down here, and I went to the seminary school that they had here, school ministry that they had. And my first couple of years here was really, really interesting, but it wasn't anything that was really out of the ordinary for me. I remember one of the first encounters that we had, we used to have a food bank where we would feed hundreds of families a month through our food bank. because we believe giving to the poor and helping the widow, the orphan, Vietnam vet, single moms, any type of veteran, those that were down and out. So I was involved heavily into that. For time's sake, I'll just kind of get to the point with this. We used to do barbecues in the park during the summer and fall months to help feed a lot of the local kids that were poor, that were going around, and a lot of the homeless and stuff. And when we were there, this lady came up to us and she started cursing us. And so we began to just worship God, and the lady screamed and she ran away. Later on, I got a call at my food bank. I was in the office. I was working on a degree in for a hospice program that I was going to work for bereavement, death, and dying. And then I was part of a chaplaincy too, as a licensed chaplain. I was getting my certification for that, and I got a call from this lady, and she worked for a certain state agency, similar to health and welfare, but it was a different state agency. And she said, "Tiberius, can I come and talk with you?" And I said, "Absolutely." And so she came to my office, and she says, "I want to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I almost ended my life. I almost went and drove my truck off the canyon rim down into Snake River Canyon." And I said, "Well, why would you do that?" She said, "Because you guys wield a force of power that I've never seen before." She said, "I am a high priestess from a certain cult, from a certain state, and I'm high up there, and I was sent to curse you guys and send demonic curses on you, and none of those things had effect. And when I did that, and you guys began to worship and pray, those things came back, reversed on me, and tormented me to the point where I didn't want to work for these entities or this organization anymore, because you had power that I didn't have." And so I was about ready to take my life, and I was going through my Rolodex, and I came across one of your cards. And so I decided to call you. What do I do now? And this lady, like I said, she was a high priestess from a certain cult organization. They worshipped the devil. And, well, I basically shared her the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so, and through that, we prayed for her. She had several months of deliverance. She brought me all of her ceremonial witchcraft stuff, dead owls, feathers, wings from hawks, ceremonial robe. She had this ring with a special stone in it, was her marriage ring to the devil, and all this weird stuff. And I cataloged it and marked, and then I burnt it. And we prayed over her trailer, and she had several manifestations that would come out of her. Her body would shake and contort, and her face would change. And this isn't the first time I've seen this. I dealt with this kind of stuff when I was a teenager. And when sometimes deliverance is something that you walk through. It's not something that may happen automatically, because a lot of times darkness and dark things are attached to trauma. And the way a lot of these organizations try to be like cryptids that are evil, that try to get power over you, is they do it through brainwashing and trauma. And there was a lot of traumatic things that she went through. She was connected to, there was a cult. I don't remember the name of the cult, but I think it was called the Jones cult. I don't remember his name, but it was a well-known cult back in the 70s, and she was a young girl then, and she got out of there before they went down to, I think it was South America, and all drank poison Kool-Aid and died. And so she was a part of that. So this is all of her life. She grew up in this stuff. So she's been, hurt and abused and all this kind of stuff. That's when the darkness gained authority in her life through fear and intimidation and brainwash. Well, when the light of Jesus Christ came into her life, she started beginning to be set free from some of these things. Now, from a lot of the trauma, she went and saw psychiatrists and psychologists and things like that. And as a man of faith, and I know Lobo as well, we always work with medical doctors if it is needed, because there are some things that they have expertise in that we don't. And she saw, and she was put on some medications for some of the trauma that she went through. And long story short, she became part of our church, and she helped work in the food bank and the benevolence ministries that we had. And one night she saw a young girl that was hitchhiking. She picked her up and brought her back to her little trailer, and this was in Hanson, Idaho, where she lived. which is close to Kimberly and all these experiences we had up there. The older lady that was part of our organization went to sleep. The young lady, she was sent to go and kill this woman because she left the cult. And what this girl did was she turned the gas on in her house, and then she put a candle in another room so that it would blow up, and if it didn't do that, at least she would die of asphyxiation. Well, she woke up before that happened and called the fire department and blew the candle out, and they were able to go in there and turn the gas off and clear the air out and check for gas leaks. And this girl ended up being gone. She just left, this hitchhiker that she picked up. So the assassination attempt didn't happen. Long story short, this dear saint, she ended up, she died a few years ago, and we were still close friends. But the worst that they could do to her was crack the windshield on her pickup. That's all the power they had. And I'm gonna leave it there because I know we're probably under a time constraint right now. But I've got more stories.
The power that Tiberius is talking about. So just so we can, we have a lot of stuff, but I want you guys to know this time when me being the pastor of the church, we had this homeless vet come in. And he comes in, right, and he begins to scream and curse and yell really loud, disrupting the service. And so I go up to him and I'm like, hey man, what's up? I knew what it was. I knew it was a demonic, something spiritual. So I go to him like, hey, I'm talking to the spirit and not to him. And all of a sudden this guy runs away from me and runs to the front where the preacher's preaching, right? And he just goes on 4 legs, like on his hands and feet, and he starts running like an animal on the front of the church, right? And he starts running, and people were freaking out. I'm chasing him, right? Other people are chasing him, and we can't catch him because he's running. I mean, it's really weird. Like, he's jumping over pews and chairs, and it's really, really weird. Finally, we corner him, and we tackle him. Before we tackle him, he looks at us in the corner and he puts his hands up like claws, and he begins to growl and snap at us. And we just jump at him, and he hits a couple people. We grab him, we hold him down, and he's fighting and screaming, growling, and just saying weird stuff that we don't understand. And then he just passes out, and he's out for like 15-20 minutes, and we take him downstairs to the kitchen area, and I make him a sandwich and get him stuff ready, and we have people, the ushers, who are like being prepared, who are ready, but they're outside of the room. And he wakes up and he tells me, he goes, what the hell happened? I said, hey, you had a demon in you. I'm like, we cast it out. And he goes, what? He told me he's been in Vietnam, and he had bombs explode next to him. He was shot, and he never experienced what he experienced that day. And that man was like set free that day. He ended up leaving, and I never saw him again. But that's what happened that day in that church. And going back to the owls, my wife said she saw a human-sized owl one day, a man-sized owl in a field. She's driving as a little girl, she's in the passenger side, and she sees it, and she's like, what is that? She's like, it's a person in the dark in the field. And this is in Aberdeen, Idaho, around Idaho Falls and all that. She sees a man, and they're driving, and she notices it's an owl. And she said it was like a man, and that night they lost somebody, like one of their family members lost his life. And so that's why she associated, like, even her growing up in the church, they knew, like, the owls and the lechuza, like there was something real about that.
And something that I'd like to add for your listeners, these are just our humble experiences. If they've got a different viewpoint, a different religion, we respect that, and we honor that. These are just things that have happened to us and that have worked for us. And we're not trying to prove anything or cause any strife or like that with any of the listeners. These are just the things we've experienced that humbly that we just share, that we're asked to share.
And that's a good analogy of it too, because personally we always give in with opinions, and opinions are opinions, and people don't always have to respect opinions. But I think when paranormal encounters take place, and I'm a firm believer because I've had some paranormal occurrences myself, and personally, when there's a stribe of some sort of demonic presence or the bad juju that happens to arouse itself when it comes to a lot of these cases, you know, it is a very frightening experience, much like cryptids, because you really don't know how to go about it, even in the term of faith. But still, though, as a whole, I find it interesting because there is a lot that is filled in. It actually makes you wonder, how do people get possessed? How do people say these things? In the case of the person that came into the food bank, you had an occurrence where someone was under some sort of possession, or in the case of the creature that Lobo, your grandfather, had shot, La Chasa, that of some nature. Where does it come from? What is it about the bad mojo? And it's just evil.
That's exactly, when people really like woo away from the bad mojo, it's and I'm not here to judge anybody or to say, what you need to, but like there's more out there. I want to say that, like, there's more out there. Like, if you investigate and you research and you just use your God-given freedom of will to research and analyze and to be open-minded, you're gonna find out that there's some trippy stuff. They're like going to it, like, so in the last episode, or I don't know if I shared it in the last one, my mom, she used to practice Wicca. She was I always saw her with her friends, and I've read her book, The Wicca. I just remember seeing memories as a little kid with her friends, and seeing the book with the star, and seeing something that looked like Wicca on it. And I know that she's told me that she's practiced it before, but she's always saw the Hat Man, and it was a shadow person. And when I was, my mom, I love her, bless her heart. She has some, a lot of spiritual and mental stuff that happens. And so every few years as a kid, she'd have a nervous breakdown, and the spiritual stuff would happen, and she'd see these shadow figures, and she would call him the Hat Man. Imagine being a little kid in the dark, and your mom coming running to you saying, the Hat Man is gonna grab me, please help me. And she wakes me up at night, and I'm like, what? I'm a little kid, and she says, he's over there, the Hat Man, he's wearing a hat and a trench coat. She would say, he's gonna grab me. And it reminded me, like, she was acting like a little kid, and that's her nervous breakdown. And that was my story as a kid. And as I started getting older, I would question it, like, oh, maybe it's just mental, or is it spiritual, or is it both, or whatever. But the last outbreak she had, I was at work, and my wife called me. She said, hey, your mom is freaking out. Nobody could stop her. She needs help right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm gone. And I go straight over there, and two people, including my wife, are holding her down, and she's screaming and crying, and it's daylight. It's like 2 in the afternoon. She's pointing in the corner of her room, and she's saying, the Hat Man's back. There he is. He's here for me. And I look at the corner, and there's a shadow in the corner, right? And I'm like, and nobody's believing her. Everybody's like, oh, she's losing it again. It's nervous. It's all mental. So what I do is, like, where's he at? I'm pissed. I'm like, where's that dumbass at, Mom? And she's like, he's right there, because I'm mad. And I go, right here, and everybody's like, whatever, don't even mess with it. I pointed right here, and when I put my finger, it was ice cold. Like, it was, I mean, it's summer. And when I said, he's right here, and it was in the shadow in the corner of the ceiling, it was ice cold. And the goosebumps on my arms and my neck rose up. And I looked back at my mom, and she was terrified, and nobody believed her. So what I began to do is I began to pray, and I began to rebuke whatever it was. And the shadow got smaller and smaller. And I was showing everybody, I'm like, look, everybody pray right now. and it got so small to where it looked like a regular shadow, where like basically nothing was even there, just a little dimness from the way the room was, and it was gone. And then she calmed down and she got up, but when I got there, it was a black shadow, and everybody, it was like either it was hiding and it wanted people to, and I think about it like predators hide. They don't want to be known. They don't want people to see what they are. So it was hiding in the corner where people suspected a shadow would be, and she was saw it, and it was ice cold, like ice cold. And as we prayed, it got smaller and it left. Really that is the day that I knew without a doubt, all the time she ran and had her breakdowns as a kid, that something was going on.
That's a pretty intense history, considering the fact that it's almost as if it was like constant time and time again, some sort of pressure to go ahead and have those occurrences. And for you, as somebody, of the religious faith and what you practice, I mean, it must have been hard for you, especially because this is a family member.
Yeah, I love my mom, and she's amazing. She doesn't live too far from me, and I think about all. I've asked her. I asked her. I was like, Mom, what did you do, like with the Wicca stuff? She's like, oh, well, I had a really close friend of mine who's a witch from what is she called, like a covenant or a coven or something around here in our area. I lived in Gooding at this time, in the Gooding County area, and Gooding, like that area is really 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 creepy. And so she told me like they would pray to the elemental spirits, and they would ask for good luck, and they would ask for all these different things. And she said it would start to get dark, like it started like like they had new member come in or whatever, and stuff started getting darker and darker. And then she ended up leaving, and the people she was with were pissed off that she left. And when I was a kid, I remember that stuff. I was like, it's like, I don't know how old I was. I had to have been like 5 or 6 years old to see her with her friends and seeing the book. And I remember going on her bed when she was out of the room and looking at the book with the star, and I seen Wicca on it, and opening it, seeing pictures with animals and all these weird stuff, and I'm like, man, what is this? And I would be, and then I was afraid of the dark. As a kid, I would hear growls in the night and these weird things, and she would say, oh, you're dreaming, and it's the movies you're watching or whatever. And I was always like, man, there's something up. I remember you doing something sketchy. And then she basically asked for forgiveness for what she put us into, and she, without knowing it, basically what she was doing. But she still has the Hat Man that follows her to this day. And whenever he comes, whenever he appears, I'll be there. I'll be there to help my mom.
Well, that's a good blessing too. I mean, especially indeed with all of these paranormal occurrences, and even too with just cryptids, what we talked about earlier. But guys, let me throw it to you into perspective like this. I mean, out of a lot of the people I've spoken to, and this is nothing against anybody I've spoken to prior in the past of the show, but I mean, I've never really come across a very much more informative and interesting pair of researchers such as yourselves. I mean, personally, you guys have a lot of cases. You guys have a lot of, interesting facts and interesting ways of putting a lot of the research out there and your perspectives. And personally, I have to say it's very fun to interview you guys. I think you guys are great. But before we get the ball rolling, I want to ask you guys a couple of additional questions. First and foremost, we talked about it briefly. You guys talked a little bit about it a little earlier, but when it comes to cryptids, when it comes to paranormal, I want to ask you guys firsthand, when it comes to such as creatures like the Dogman, what do you personally think we're dealing with here? Do you think we're dealing with something here that is from a different dimension, or are we dealing with something here that is very much so a creature man-made but has characteristics of that embark supernatural or spiritual type ability?
Well, I just want to say that nobody knows, right? Like like I can give my perspectives of my experience, my research, my faith, other people's experiences, historical facts, biblical perspectives, regional things. Like I can put all that, everything, and I could put it in one little bowl. And what I think about it is there's something spiritual about it, guys. Like there has to be. How can these things appear and disappear, and or is it cloaking, right? Is it like a chameleon, or like a like a cuttlefish kind of a thing where it can mimic its surroundings, or like, I don't know, it could be like that physical part. But what about the spiritual part? I know lions and tigers and elephants give like these like it
Infrasound.
infrasound, and it could do something to you, and people could take that as a spiritual thing. So there's people who are listening, like, you can give a physical perspective, a scientific perspective for all these weird things that are unexplainable. But you think about it, the dreams, even the dreams, I was like, why would something haunt you in your dreams? And how can something that you don't even tell your kids about, they come and tell you, and they say they see it, and then they see it in their dreams and all this weird stuff. It's like there's something spiritual about it, but I can't explain what, or my perspective of it is like a spiritual manifestation can't eat meat. A spiritual manifestation can kick your door down. A spiritual manifestation could walk on my roof like it did in the last encounter. It can do that. And how, I don't know if it comes out of dimensions or what, but I do know that there's something spiritual about it, and there's something physical, because they eat creatures, they drink dirty water, they live in my canyon, right? But they disappear, they appear, or they migrate or cloak, or who knows what it is. So from Lobo's perspective, it's both. It's like spiritual and physical, and I really can't explain it.
This is Tiberius. From my limited perspective, I am both a physical and a spiritual being. I eat, I drink water, I wear clothes, I get cold, but also there's a spiritual side of me where I've seen miraculous things happen, things that in the natural world don't seem possible, but is. And so I believe that the spiritual and natural realms are connected. I believe they can be one and the same. I believe that people are a product of environment, but you don't have to stay there. I believe that we have been told again by the powers that be, this is the way life really is. But until you go out there and experience it yourself, I used to go by my parents' experience. My parents have never been out of the United States. I've been to almost every continent except Antarctica and Australia. And the things that I've seen and experienced, my parents would have no idea what to talk about or how to explain. It's like trying to explain another country unless you've been there and been with the people for a while, lived with the people, and seen and described how they think, how they work, how they do things. I think that's the way this subject is. I personally believe that it can be both. I believe that there are things that we don't understand that are as natural can be, but because we don't understand them, we put them in the woo-woo realm, meaning the supernatural realm. Because where does that word come from? Supernatural. It means something more than of this realm. And so I think that it can definitely be both. But, if we were to take inventions that we have now back 200 years, they would be called magic. And actually, it was just technology. So I think as we grow and as we open our heart and our mind to the truth that is out there, and we are with like-minded people, meaning they have a hunger and thirst for truth and for their brother and sister's humanity's well-being, I think our eyes will begin to open. And we don't need the people that are in charge or the powers that be to tell us what the truth is. But we can touch, taste, smell, and hear the truth for ourselves. And then when we share different encounters with other people, I believe what they tell me, and I always glean something from of wisdom because, again, I'm a student in this.
That's a good piece, and personally, I agree. I mean, you know what? You have to have that type of wisdom. You have to have that type of open mind, something that has deliverance, and something that, too, you can get an understanding on, and everybody else can. And it's good to know a lot more about things than other people do because it enhances your surroundings furthermore. And that gets me into my next question. You know, with seeing Dogman, with seeing Bigfoot, and even just with paranormal, has all of these experiences increased your intelligence and have changed the way you've seen life and your surroundings?
Hmm. Well, I would have to say absolutely. Lobo here. When I come across when I come, being in the canyon, we'll find a shoe, you know, at random places. I have a really dear brother of mine who's from the Mojave Desert, and his father was in the cult and witchcraft and like had real like serious stuff. That I mean, if he were here, he would tell you guys some stories that were like, "Are you serious?" And it would be confirmed in the region if you looked it up. But anyways, we would find a lot of left shoes, like just random stuff. And whenever if I were to find a left shoe 5 years ago out in the forest, I'd be like, oh, somebody lost it or whatever. But now, I mean, he would tell me in the satanic rituals that for some reason over there would be left shoes, like it was like a prize or trophy or something. And they were all kid shoes, children's shoes. So now when I go down to the canyon and I find children's shoes and their left shoe, I look at it differently. I'm like, whoa, why is there a children's left shoe in the middle of nowhere where no little kid like this can walk through? And then I'm walking more, and then I see like a jacket in a tree 30 feet in the air, shredded. I'm like, whoa, what the hell's going on? So my perspective is so different, and we're not going to go to the canyon at night unarmed, without flashlights, singing Kumbaya anymore. It's more like we're gonna go down. If we're going down there, it's gonna be for a reason. And I can't tell you how many times that I've had Tiberius call me and say like, hey, if when you go down there, you call me, tell me when you leave, tell me we're gonna come back, and if you don't come back, we're going down there armed. We're taking people, like all these things. Now when I go to the mountain to go grab a Christmas tree for Christmas, we go and we cut down our tree in the forest. We let them know. We let people know, like, hey, we're leaving. This is where we're going. This is where we're going to be. This is when we're going to be back. So it's definitely given me knowledge to protect me, my family, and other people around me. Other people were like, hey, we're going to go to this location of the canyon to go fishing, night fishing. I told them, well, I wouldn't recommend going at night, but if you do, take people with you, take firearms, and take a lot of flashlights, a lot of lights, because for some reason these creatures, these beings don't like lights. And, like we said, if they're spiritual or physical, they eat deer down the street from my house. They twist their limbs off down the street, and it's like, so they eat meat. So go pack in, take a light. They don't want to be in the light. Take people. The more people, they tend to stay away from you. Just different things like that. So I say more knowledgeable. It's been for me, and more, prepared, because little did I know, I live in the middle of all this stuff.
This is Tiberius for me. Absolutely, I believe it has increased my knowledge. It has increased my experience. It's increased. There's a Greek word called metron, my area of authority. There's an area of authority that I've been granted, and because of that, and I just want to shout out to all the listeners, because every one of their stories that I hear, it gives me a greater insight, and I want to thank people that share their stories, because it gives more knowledge and it gives more understanding, so we can be safer and so that we can live a life that's not in terror and fear. Because I grew up, I've got similar stories as Lobo does, and we don't have time to get into that tonight. But when I was a younger man, I was very arrogant, and I thought, nothing can touch me because of my spiritual background and because I had high-powered weapons. And there was a time that I challenged the elemental forces, and I had a manifestation, and I thought it was going to kill me. And later that day, after that night passed, that day came, I found out I wasn't 10 foot tall and bulletproof, that I needed to tread lightly and humbly. And learning other people's experiences and listening from wisdom of other people, I haven't had to learn the hard way. I haven't had a child disappear like that. I've been able to keep all my children close. Could my children have disappeared? Absolutely. We've been in places where I thought, I got my kid tied to the tailgate. He's 6 years old. He ain't going nowhere. I got a dog. I got a rifle. I can turn my back for 5 minutes. In those cases, children go missing. People go missing. Whether it's Sasquatch, whether it's Dogman, whether it's some kind of a cult, the federal government, aliens, portals. I've ran into similar cases of those things throughout my life, where it could be all of those things. I don't know what is causing people to go missing, but I do know that these things that are negative, or globes or orbs, they cause trauma, and that trauma breeds fear, and that fear gives these things authority over our lives. And I'm trying to live a life without intimidation or fear, but humility, great respect, and wisdom.
Real quick, Chris, about the knowledge part and what it's taught me, going camping in the South Hills, which is just south of where I live. There's a place called, Cleveland Lake. Cleveland Lake, and those of you who know it, you can Google it. It's like an old volcano that's hollowed out, and there's a beautiful lake in there. And listening to all your episodes and other people's episodes about like witchcraft, all these crazy stuff, right? We're camping at night, and there's nobody out there, and around midnight we hear a goat, and all of a sudden down our maybe 100 yards there's another fire, and you have to drive in there with a 4x. Here in Idaho, you have to have a 4x4 that's lifted to get out there, and there's somebody out there, and I'm like, there's nobody out there. When did they come? I told my, when did they come? And she's like, oh, maybe they hiked up. It's like 4,000 elevation. There's no way somebody's gonna hike up. I'm like, oh, maybe somebody did, but I'm like, there's a goat out there. She's like, that's a deer. I'm like, did you hear the goat? And she's like, no, that's a deer. I'm like, babe, I've heard a goat before. I'm like, I think there's something sketchy going on. And she's like, oh, it's a deer, and somebody else just hiked up. The next morning, we walked to that campsite. Nobody was there. There was a pentagram and at the fire pit, and then there was animal bones around it. So they were even doing occult rituals at the campsite where families go every day. Families are down there camping and making memories and having a good time, and there's people doing sacrifices down there, or up there I should say, which is crazy. So like, just knowing, researching, I'm like, no, I hear a goat in the middle of the mountains at midnight. I'm like, it's not normal, and so that's what's taught me to be prepared and to be cautious about things.
Something that I'd like to give credit to, I think it was like in 2016, 2017, when I used to work a night shift I worked for a certain company in dealing with environmental stuff. And so I would be outside at night, and I'm going to tell you, it's podcasts like this, Chris, that saves people's lives and gives them hope to build a normal future for their family. Because I still listen to Dogman Encounters with Vic Cundiff, his Sasquatch show, Bigfoot Outlaw Radio, these other shows that I first started listening to, and I began to say, okay, I'm not crazy. There is some truth here. And then I just learned, and I listened, and I started building, notebooks and taking notes and putting them in the right categories for me to prioritize things and to put things away, be able to teach my own children. I've got one child, my oldest. He still is very sketchy about Dad. I don't know, but he owns more guns than I do, and he's more careful going to the woods than I am. So I hope he's listening. But again, it's like when people like yourself, Chris, that take your time and your resources to put this information out there. We want to say thank you to individuals like you and your co-host. They give up your resources, times from your family, and stuff like that to let people hear about what's truly out there. Because I think this is what's going to get the truth into people's hands, so they can be safer, live fuller, more safer, happier lives, and know that they're not crazy, they're not lunatics. And even if they have to take meds, back in the day, I used to take a lot of types of medications from the doctor because I thought I was not normal as far as my ways of thinking. And now all I take is aspirin when I have a headache. So again, thank you for what you guys are doing and what you guys are contributing to keeping our fellow man safe.
First and foremost, thank you for the kind words. I mean, personally, you know, what we do here on the show and what we try to do different is we try to give enough open honesty for just not only us, but also for the eyewitness or the interviewee. And it's important to keep that type of position, not just for the sake being of the profession, but too because everybody has a story that's presented to the table. And we take it with grains of salt or we take it with open belief, either or, you know, we listen to a story. And the importance of what we do here, and you're right, it is to help others, because without these outlets, I don't think anybody would really have some sort of relief when having these encounters. And it's not just, you know, people who've had Bigfoot encounters or Dogman encounters, people who've had paranormal encounters, and you have people who have seen things overseas that they don't even have a good explanation on. And, you know, they come to places like this and they try to find out the source. So really, I mean, thank you. And I have to say, too, you know, for one of the more urban and more unique type of interviews to conduct, I have to say, like I mentioned, too, you know, you two are a very good asset, a very good duo of researchers, and you guys have it in the right direction. I personally like your research. I like how you guys go about things, and I really do want to hear more updates down the road, and I would love to have you guys back on again, even just to talk more of this stuff.
Well, you know what? I would say, you know what? Thank you first and foremost, because honestly, where do you turn, Chris? Where does the average person turn when they saw a creature that doesn't exist, or when something happens and the numbers don't add up, but you know you experienced it, or something, you know, your family or something? Where do you go? People are gonna call you a liar. They're gonna ridicule you. You know, your testimony's gonna be ruined. All these different things. We go to these places. You know, that's where I went. You know, when that creature was on my roof, I'm like, what? A freaking dog, man. I'm like, you know, honestly, I thought about like a kind of a silly creature with a tongue hanging out and ears hanging, and then I'm like looking into it more. I'm like, oh no, they're talking about the werewolf or a wolf man or whatever. You know, I'm like, oh, that's serious, you know. And then they're on roofs. Other people have said they're on roofs and all these things, you know. So that's where we turn when we have our encounters, and you can count on us here in Idaho to keep you updated and to let you know, because again, we don't have to travel way out. We just go down the darn street or wherever, and we're there. We go for a hike and it's there.
And something with this kind of information. Back to one of the other questions the first question you gave us was, I'm when I go out somewhere, even when I go to Walmart or something like that, I take my time more and I plan things more, because when we were up in the woods, you know, 10 years ago, I wouldn't know what to look for Bigfoot signs or Dogman signs. But now I'm finding these things all over the place, or at least could be. If I didn't see it put that footprint there, or if I didn't see it build the structure, I'll just take a picture and say, this is what I saw. And what it could be, you know, like young Atlas, he saw this thing. It has forever changed him. And he, for 2 months, he wouldn't go where he was working for Idaho Fish and Game. He was on a facility by himself. He hated to go. He almost quit. And Lobo and I just tried to encourage him, you know, here's a pistol. This is how, you know how to use it. You can call one of us, you know. And we gave him, here's a young man with a bright future who's going to be able to, if he continues in that career field, when he come, my hope is that I hope that I've served enough and given enough, so individuals like himself, that when they're out there serving the public, in let's say he goes as a conservation officer or a field investor, whatever, that he can have this experience, and now he has the compassion and the humility and the understanding to say, I believe you. This is how we should deal with this. And to give people closure and to give people a way to find peace to cope and to have a coping mechanism. That's the greatest accomplishment that we can achieve.
I have to agree, and you put it best, because when people have these encounters, they don't know what they're experiencing, and when they come back to it, it leaves them with so much PTSD, leaves them with so much traumatic event of what they've seen. They have nothing to go to, and that's why we create outlets, and that's why I've always kept honesty with my show and how I go about it, because everyone deserves to hear what they've encountered, but also hear it from the direction of deliverance, and to know that it's okay, that these things are out here. And it's important to engage and help others, because they don't know how to cope with these things. And you guys are doing a tremendous job of going out there and collecting this, despite whether it could be dangerous or not, but hearing things and collecting things, and to bring an awareness to it. And hopefully sooner or later in your area that there'll be more awareness, because there is a lot of activity there, and I'm telling you, with all that's being said from what you've spoken about in the past interview and of course this current one, there is something there that is unexplainable, and it definitely is intriguing. But gentlemen, though, before we do go, I feel like we've kind of already touched base with it, but for you guys personally, I want to thank you for doing this show. I want to thank you for coming on, taking the time out of your schedule for this evening. But before we do go, if you guys have any other additional final words you guys would like to say to take the floor, it's all of you, whether it's for me or it's for the audience listening in. These last few words and moments are for you guys, so feel free to take it away.
This is Tiberius. What I'd like to say is don't doubt yourself. I used to suffer from extreme self-doubt and such anxiety because I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't have anybody that believed me. And being a product of my environment, I broke through that. I found a way to have inner peace through the faith that I do have. And so faith will help you out of those times that you have fear and dread and true dread and anxiety and self-doubt and worthlessness. I turned to a faith that made me stronger. It opened my eyes, and then it began to teach me as I began to work with other people like Lobo, who is a true friend and a true brother, that we've got each other's backs. You've got to build a community of people around you that you can trust and let your guard down, because the reason we nicknamed this young man Young Atlas, because he thought that he could handle it all and handle the world like Atlas did when the weight of the world was on his shoulders. And when you're a young man in your early 20s, you think you are all that and that you can handle the world. But the truth is, life is so short, and it doesn't take much to take one of our lives. Our environment changes a little, and we could lose our life easily. And so knowing the precious gift of life that has been given to us and how to live that life well done in the end, I think is very important, and being equipped with the skills. When you grow up in a situation like, I know there are many people out there that have had similar experiences as Lobo and I, or maybe they haven't, but they still have those feelings of self-doubt, worthlessness. I think it's being human. But there's a place that you can find where you can find the self-worth, and you can overcome those things, and you can grow as a person and as a human, and keep an open heart and mind to help your fellow man.
And for me as Lobo, I just want to say to just to have my back and to be prepared. And if I want to respect everybody, but I do believe in spiritual forces and demonic influence and the conjuring of these creatures that are called Dogman and different types of creatures. Like people can conjure those and put hexes and curses. Like if there's anybody listening to this who knows my area and it's a small town and I just want to say, like, just leave us alone, right? Leave me alone, I'll leave you alone, and the best to you. And I'm not gonna mess with you. Don't mess with me. And I'm saying this because I've had this at my house. I've been followed. My wife's been harassed. My kids have seen on a damn bike ride. And I'm well prepared. I've never been a big guy with having all these firearms, but I sleep with them fully loaded by my bed, and my kids are well acquainted with firearms. They're well trained. They know the ins and outs of these firearms, and I have them hidden and secret location throughout my home and my property. And again, that's no way somebody should live, right? But that's my life here, and I just wanted to throw that out there that, like, hey, my location is, like, people here are gonna know where it's at. I mean, it's not, we're not hiding it. My wife told me I shouldn't give the name of our city and and what we do for a living and all that, and I did it anyway. And I'm just I want to be upfront and honest with people for credibility, but I'm hoping it works out for the best for us and for people who are listening, for for protection and knowledge and wisdom. But with that said, like, leave me alone. I'll leave you guys alone. And if anybody are trying to conjure up anything that's not of God, or anything that's trying to hurt us, like, we're prepared spiritually and physically. And that's just another day here where I live. So thank you guys in the Magic Valley, right? So thank you guys for listening to us, and we appreciate it, Chris. And we're here whenever I'll be shooting you updates of our area. Summer is just starting here in Idaho.
We're gonna go back to Jawbridge.
We're gonna go back to Jawbridge and investigate.
Something real funny is when we were in Jawbridge, Lobo goes up to a local guy and says, "Hey, do you guys hang out after dark?" And the guy goes, "Are you stupid? You better have a gun. If you do, we go indoors before night falls." And this was just from a local at a gas station.
And just so you guys know, like, I'm not exaggerating. No. We're really not. We drive 30 minutes south of us. We're in that canyon. We go a couple hours the other way. We're in Skinwalker Ranch. We go north.
Caves where the giants were found.
Yeah, 15 minutes from Twin Falls is the biggest lava ice caves in the world, right? It's just, I can go on and on. The Missing 411 documentary is just, it's nuts. So, but we're here. We'll keep you guys updated, and we thank you for all the listeners, and you guys rock.
And Chris, if you get a slow point, you want more stories, just let us know.
Absolutely. There's so many stories to go around, but so many to cover in one such episode. But gentlemen, I'd love to have you guys back. I know a lot of people else would like to have you guys back. And even if we did a live Q&A, anything else works best. I'd love to have you all back. You guys are very intelligent gentlemen. I really respect you guys, and I love your style of thinking. And I want to thank you guys for going out there and doing what you do as well. Ladies and gentlemen, Lobo and Tiberius. Folks, thank you all for tuning in. You all have a fantastic night now. I want to thank Lobo and Tiberius for coming on the show once again. I think I spoke almost 5 hours with these guys in total of doing the show. And to be honest, when I was speaking to them, they have such a very positive and very spiritual way of going about things. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. I actually mean that in a good way, because if you think about it, they talk about these encounters they've had, and they even when they discuss the ones when they had made their errors when they were doing the investigations in the canyon, they have such a positive direction with it because they know they're out there, they know what they've seen. And I've probably, if anything, these are probably some of the most genuine folk I've spoken to. And I know it kind of sounds like I kind of just don't, I'm not saying that nobody else I've spoken to has been genuine. I mean, clearly, if you follow my live streams and my show, you know that I am very honest with things and how I go about somebody who I speak to. But just having a casual conversation with these guys, it felt very casual, just listening to what they had to say. And ultimately, for the activity that they've had in Idaho, it doesn't surprise me. There's so many forests and state parks, and where they live, they aren't too far away from heavy hotspots where there's been activity, whether it's been cryptid, or paranormal. So, personally, I think that these guys have probably some of the most unique, dynamic stories I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to, and I want to thank them once again for coming on the show. I want to kind of talk right now, maybe interact with you guys a bit, and tell me what you guys thought, because personally, I thought these guys were great. I really loved speaking to them. They have a lot of reports out there, and I would love to hear more, because they're in such a huge region, too, with so much land and so much history. And Idaho, too, especially, is very historic. So you have a lot of activity mass that could easily be such a bend. But I want to talk a little bit about their encounters. I mean, if you recall from last week's episode when I had uploaded it and we had talked about Lobo's encounters with Bigfoot, I've always often heard in many cases of Bigfoot reports where some people who've made vocalizations, that the vocalizations come back, whether threatening or intimidating, in both ways, same. But in such a circumstance of just being put in a position where you are making vocals, you are making sounds, and something in the woods happens to make the response, and it's a very creepy response because personally, you don't know what's in those woods. And I think in Lobo's case, when he had that encounter 7 years ago, it definitely, and he even said it changed his perspective on things. I think this guy had been more cautious about what was out there following that, and then also too when he went into mention of seeing, or at least him and his family just smelling the odor at the campsite, which often too many Bigfoots reported. And speaking of campsites, what I like about with Tiberius and Lobo is that when they are investigating these campsites, we saw photographs last week of those guys. I apologize, I just hit my other microphone. Last week when we were showcasing some photographs of campsites that Tiberius had taken pictures of, and even Tiberius had mentioned about how a lot of these campsites were very disarrayed, that there was a huge trace that there was nothing there, but something had to have been there to tear apart tents, to rip apart coolers, and any other additional accessories. Now, one thing that he mentioned to me, and I think it also kind of sparked some interest with you guys too, was that he had mentioned that they can go to these campsites the day of noticing this, and then the following come back and see that it's completely wiped, that it's cleaned, as if nothing ever had hit there. That opens up that infamous conspiracy, but not really just much of a conspiracy, but really just something of the higher-ups coming in and just taking care of business, clearing out an area that clearly does not need to have anyone come forth and say, wow, that is there. Now, clearly, the more other way of going about it would be park rangers, but that at the same time, I mean, either or, there is some sort of higher up involved that is cleaning up the campsites. So that is a very interesting thing to note out. And also, too, when he was talking about some of the people that he had known about, that he'd worked with on a period of time, in reference to mentioning certain words that they would contradict and then go back and try to cover it up as if they never said that word. Very interesting piece right there. I really do believe that these guys have a lot of activity and a lot of things that are being going about, especially in Tiberius's line of work. To have someone like that do a line of work and to come on a show and talk about this, I think it's very strong, because personally you don't really see that. And I know many people can kind of be skeptical and question, well, how do we know that he is this and that? I mean, personally, at the end of the day, folks, it doesn't surprise me that there's many people who do have a higher up position who do come on these shows. They don't necessarily have to give away. They can mention certain things, but in this case with Tiberius, he's talking about it. But it's not like there are certain things that he's talking about that, for one, many of us may know. in this case when it comes to certain cover-ups and how, in this case, with the campsites being cleared up, and even too with his higher-ups mentioning about how do you know about this place or the canyon and whatnot. So it's definitely more around the back bush that they do know. So I do believe it. I do believe. And personally, I will say that many can keep an honest opinion on it and be open with it, but that I think Tiberius has had some pretty interesting accounts, as well as Lobo, and I can't go any further with it. They've really had a very interesting array of stories to showcase from last week and even to this week. And when we talk about some of Lobo's paranormal, Lobo mentions about the La Chasa. He mentions about how one of his youth students had these supernatural attacks going on because their mother was a witch. It's very possible when you believe with the paranormal aspect of things, because you do have a thought that paranormal is more believable than cryptids for some. Paranormal is more notorious. Obviously, paranormal is more explored on certain channels, certain networks, but also, too, not to get sidetracked, you have a more open platform for paranormal because of many covering it in long periods of time. So, paranormal, when happening in Idaho with this family, to me was pretty freaky, because now you have, mirrors being broken and the work of some sort of black voodoo, which unfortunately, as a result, terrified these kids. You couldn't imagine, and even when Lobo was talking about it, to have a kid be put in such a huge position, whether it's with cryptid or paranormal, you got to use the act. And I think what Lobo did in the right mind was the right thing. And even though he found out about what happened afterwards with the update, I hope for the best. I do believe that is the work. I do believe that in areas like this that there are certain lines that happen like this when it comes to that type of paranormal. And also, too, just seeing shadow people. There's a lot of resorts, there's a lot of history in Idaho, a lot of paranormal. So it's strongly put into perspective there. But these guys were pretty interesting to sit down and talk to. I want to know what you guys think, because I think personally these guys really do have a very heavy catch with what's going on there. And I want to know more about these canyons, because personally, to me, these canyons do tell a big story. And you got to remember too, Idaho has so many national forests, from whether it's Salmon Chalice National Forest, the Payette National Forest, or even general going a little southern, you have the Craters of the Moon National Monument Preserve, all these other huge landmarks, but a lot of landmass where a lot of creatures can easily live in harmony. So there's a lot of things going on in this place, and I think that there is just, a lot more to get into perspective with Idaho. And even in places such as Napa, or going a little east, going towards the National Forest of Sawtooth, there are some activity reports, even looking through Cloaked Hedgehog's map, and even just looking through a couple reports on the internet, there is often many reports in Idaho, and this just adds to it. So there's a lot of interesting things popping in through this state, and I would love to find out more. I do know that I had interviewed somebody a couple of weeks ago, or at least I think a month ago now, that had a report in Idaho in lavender fields. There was a bit of a mixed reception when it came to that episode because of the way this individual had spoken. Ultimately, I was skeptical of myself as well as Ryan. I'm not afraid to be open about it, but personally, my point is that because it was an Idaho report, and this being Idaho investigators, I do believe that there are reports of them seen in such fields as that as well. But at the same time, I also think that with what sources come out through, I think that it is with good, honest, and good certainty that we take type of reports such as that with a grain of salt. With these Idaho cases, though, I do think that there is something going on there, and the canyons do have a lot of report, and a lot of the things that they were talking about too, like something that really caught my attention was when Lobo and Tiberius were talking about how they were playing these vocalizations and trying to attract the Dogman or Bigfoots, and with young Atlas having to see one of them so up close in such a traumatic state of point. I mean, personally, anybody would take that reaction. I don't think I talk about it as much as I do now, but I think when people have encounters and when they see them so up close, it feels more terrifying and fear and shock, because you're seeing something so up close that literally could kill you or do something. And in this case with young Atlas, I can imagine that he was very terrified, and even as Tiberius had mentioned, it was a lot to take in, I believe. So ultimately, as a result, I think that with these canyons, I would like to find out more. I think that there is something interesting here that personally really catches the eye. But I want to thank these two again, and hope you all enjoyed tonight's episode. It was a pretty long one. I think that this one was probably one of the more interesting ways of going about it, and I hope you guys enjoyed. But before we do go, I kind of want to just go ahead and I want to just go and throw some links out there. You guys can get in contact with me at thevenomousfringe@gmail.com. You can also reach me on my social media links down below, and check out Ryan's as well, guys. We'd love to have you guys follow us and check us out for updates and upcoming content besides on YouTube. Ultimately, we've had a bit of a situation with YouTube. It seems that because of the new algorithm and guidelines that YouTube is going with, that our channel does not exceed those guidelines, and we kind of had been thrown out of the algorithm. So we're in a way censored. So if you guys can really like the video and drop it out and share it if you wish, and definitely showcase that the Venomous Fringe is still producing content. It's just that we've obviously had the algorithm screw us up a bit. So we are posting content. It's not like we stopped posting a year ago before the algorithm change. We're still here. We're still fleshing out content, and we still got a lot of things to present to you guys in this upcoming week. But also too, guys, before we do go, I know that with the summer beginning to bloom in, there is some more time available. So I know a lot of you guys have been asking about a lot of live shows. I know you've been guys asking about some more Dogman. We have a lot of things coming your way. As I said, stay tuned, and I hope you guys stay hoping for it, because you're not going to want to miss this summer on the Venomous Fringe. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, you all have a good night.